Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realms continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023 here in Covington, Kentucky. We have with us in this segment Linda Zimmerman. She is a UFO, UAP researcher. She has numerous books, including books on Civil War, bad science, and Hudson Valley UFOs, the best evidence. She's here presenting on animal reactions to UFOs. It's a remarkable topic because not many people realize that animals have incredible reactions to UFOs, kind of like they do with natural phenomena whenever earthquakes, things like that are happening. So how did you come into this realm of research, Linda?
Well, as I was interviewing people and hundreds of people in the Hudson Valley, so many times the story would start with, my dogs were barking like crazy, so I went outside to see what it was and saw the UFO, or the horses, the cattle. And it started as a joke. I was giving a lecture and I said, if it wasn't for animals alerting people, we'd miss half these sightings.
Sure.
And it was kind of like, the Newton apple falling on my head. Wait a minute, what does that mean? So I jumped both feet into that rabbit hole, so to speak.
Wow. and I guess it was UFO research that you were in before you started the
Correct.
Animal research. Like you were saying, it was very much the fact of through your UFO research, you found that people were being alerted to the presence of something by their animals. How does the animal-human relationship play into encounters? When it comes to encounters, when it comes to, familiarity with encounters?
Well, in a sense, they're parallel many times,
Okay.
people's reactions, but often there isn't. I'm reminded of a case of this big German shepherd named Hans, very protective, and this woman and her friend are walking the dog. They see a dumbbell-shaped UFO over a playground, and they're kind of fascinated by it, but Big Hans is whimpering, trying to dig a hole in the ground to hide in. He's terrified, and they realized maybe we shouldn't get closer to this. If Hans is hysterical, which they have never seen,
Wow.
we need to get out of here. So in that regard, I think we can take warnings from animals that maybe running up to something like that isn't the smartest thing.
Sure. And it's interesting the fact that, they listened to their animal before they followed their own instinct to go up and be curious about it. And there are numerous situations where people get very curious about things. I mean, Travis Walton is the first one that pops to mind. Where
There's a good
his friends are
example.
like, hey, stop, man.
If only Travis had a dog with him.
And the rabbit holes that led down in their life.
Right.
Now, how frequently is it that, have you ever had any encounters where, I guess, animals are taken and brought back or are abducted with their owners?
There are cases where animals are taken and never brought back. Some dogs, there's a case where a bull was taken right out of a paddock in New Zealand. And they said the only way it could have gone was to be lifted. And they did see a UFO. In fact, this UFO, there was a ranch hand riding a horse, and he had his herding dogs. You know how energetic they are. He said all of a sudden all his dogs froze, and the horse froze, and then he realized he couldn't move either. They were all paralyzed for the duration that this craft was in the area, and then the craft took off and they could move again. And it wasn't for a few days before they realized the bull was missing, and it occurred at that same time. So I think they didn't see the bull being lifted, but I think we can probably put two and two together there.
Yeah. That's, bulls don't have thumbs to open gates and let
No.
themselves out.
No, and as the rancher said, there were so many cows to keep him happy. There's no way that bull would have left on his own, even if he could.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also the fact of when you're talking cattlemen, things like that. I mean, we heard David Paulides last night talking about the cases of elk disappearing, things like that in the Northwest America. Montana region, things like that. But when it comes to cattle, animals like that is somebody's living. They ain't hurting a cow on purpose. They ain't losing a cow on purpose.
Exactly.
Especially a bull that's there to help you breed more cows.
Right.
That's more than a prized animal.
Yes.
So now, amongst these cases, how frequently have you seen the fact of animals being changed? We hear a lot on this show from human experiencers and even folks like Sev Talk, Kathleen Martin from the Experiencer Resource Team, about not only about how lives are changed after an experience, but how people are physically changed. Sometimes, like the case they were talking about last night, where tuberculosis scars disappear. Things like that. Have you seen any cases where animals come back with similar qualities?
Well, certainly their behavior changes. Cows give less milk. Sometimes they stop giving milk.
Wow.
There's an unfortunate goat in France who, as they said, stopped doing the male goat. They slaughtered the goat eventually because he couldn't.
That's what you do when a goat hits that point. But just dogs who will hide under the bed for days or weeks. There was a case near where I live in New York where it was a Rottweiler German Shepherd Doberman mix. You can't get much more aggressive than that. Yeah.
And this UFO was hovering so close over the top of the house, they thought it was actually going to crush the house. Dog was terrified for a year. The dog would not go out in the backyard alone. And this was that's
a big dog.
Alpha male.
Yeah.
Guard dog would not step foot outside unless somebody was with him. So, and birds they stop singing. Cows and sheep don't want to stay in the paddock anymore. There's a residual, I think, effect that's left, and these animals have PTSD essentially.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I remember Terry Lovelace, whenever he came on the show, gave an example of a situation that happens with many, many experiencers, especially whenever they live out in the woods or are out in the woods, where nature ceases. Owls stop hooting that were hooting. Crickets stop singing. Everything just goes silent, like you're talking about. Like the birds stop singing. Dogs stop barking sometimes when they're an alert dog. How frequently do you hear of that situation where basically life around you stops?
Yes, those are some of the most chilling, I think.
Yeah, I've got goosebumps right now just thinking about it.
I think one of the most dramatic is from Brazil, Rio Pardo of Brazil. 3 businessmen were crocodile hunting at night, and they said, they say this infernal din was how they described of the jungle at night. Everything makes noise. A circular UFO came within 100 feet, dead silent. Absolutely everything stopped. Every bird, every insect. And one of the men was in the woods. He couldn't see the UFO. All he knew was that everything around him went silent, and he was terrified because what just happened?
Yeah. What made the whole forest go silent randomly?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but certainly, people have said during a sighting, whatever birds stop, just everything goes quiet.
And interestingly enough, I just posted an article all of a couple weeks ago talking about using electrostatic fields for soundproofing.
Huh. Okay.
And I was like, well, that's pretty much what we're talking about with any UFO, and that would explain the utter silence.
So you're shielded from it.
Yeah, and the fact of the high electrostatic field would basically stop all of that sound from the outside coming into the field.
Wow, I'm so glad I'm talking to you to learn
So
that.
just something to dig into with some of this, because it's interesting to see a lot of the technology that is being released right now as this world of disclosure comes upon us. That's one of the things I've said regularly on the show is like, keep your eyes out in the tech world right now. Because, yes, there has been apparently a large project of reverse engineering, and only way you get that money back is for it to either hit a battlefield or a shelf, one of the two. Now, when it comes to animals and UFO experiences, how frequently have you seen the case of, I guess, repeat experiences? Because frequently it's the case with human experiencers that once they've experienced, they experience numerous times after, especially if it's been a close encounter experience where they have been taken or they have had physical presence. Have you seen the same thing with animals?
For the owners who are having repeat experiences, the animals will. But a lot of the cases I've dealt with, it's a one-off, which doesn't mean it hasn't happened again, because there's not a lot of information on this out there. And unless I find the witnesses to speak to in person, you'll get these, little bits and pieces. But clearly for the poor animals who are part of somebody who maybe is having encounters, their immediate reaction, run and hide. Take off.
Well, and you have to consider it, especially most of the time whenever you have a pet, doesn't matter what the pet is, there is a bond between owner and pet. And when you're going through PTSD, when you're going through a situation, they frequently want to be there to help you, especially dogs, cats, things like that. That's one of the many reasons they are therapy animals. But when they're going through the same experience you have, that's got to be hard for the little critter, and it's got to be hard for the owner too. They're going through their own situation, much less being able to either recognize the fact that this has statically changed their animal the same way it's changed them.
Right. And hopefully they have sympathy or empathy for the animal. For the most part, I think people do. But it's difficult for them. It adds to their own stress because you're my guard dog. You're supposed to be protecting me from this.
Yeah, I got you to alert.
Right. You're under the bed.
We have this arrangement. If I give you food, you alert me to danger.
Right.
That's thousands of years of arrangement that has been just kind of cut in half.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And what has been the most impactful case that you've come across, the one that sticks with you the most and I guess reaches down and really pulls you by the gut?
Oh, yeah. There was a case in Uruguay where this guard dog on a ranch, Topo the guard dog, a craft came over the ranch. It was a dairy farm. The dairy cattle are going crazy. The generator goes out because obviously there's electrostatic fields. The owner is feeling tingling. He's getting burns. He puts his arm up to block his eyes. He's getting burns. Topo goes running towards the craft. He's the only animal he's going to defend to the death, and unfortunately it was. Within 15 feet of the craft, he suddenly stops, sits down, throws his head back, and starts howling. Just howling and howling. The craft takes off. He stops howling, but he stops eating. He gets very lethargic. 3 days later, he goes back to the spot and lays down and dies. And they do an autopsy on him. And they said his organs had been so horribly internally heated, and the body fat on the inside had melted and gone through his skin.
Wow.
So poor Topo, he must have been in agony. He was paralyzed
Poor
in
thing.
spot. And was it intentional or was it a byproduct? They
Yeah.
had to know.
Yeah.
How can you not know you're frying this poor dog from the inside out?
Yeah.
And that I get choked up. I think of this
Yeah.
poor dog. He's trying to protect his owner and his property, and it cost him his life.
Well, and that really brings to heart the entire concept of this symposium, Friend or Foe 2.0. When it was on last year, the friend or foe concept was friend or foe in the media. How has the media treated the UFO UAP topic? Have they been our friend or foe?
Right.
Have they said friend or foe as far as UFO UAP? And right now, the topic of friend or foe is how it is being treated by the government. And even the speech by David Politas last night about missing 411 and the animals being watched, the food supply being watched, things like that. Friend or foe?
Yeah.
Friend or foe?
Right.
And even this situation, I guess if you're an intergalactic animal lover, like you said, you can't know that your technology isn't gonna do that. You can't not realize it's happening.
Exactly.
So friend or foe, and the dog obviously did not think friend
No.
by his actions.
No. Whatever was alerting him, he saw a danger that he needed to go into protect mode.
Yeah.
So, that is the one that always chokes me up. But even the animals who are just hurt as a result or traumatized, they don't understand what's going on. Not that we understand what's going on, but for them, you can imagine their whole world is suddenly turned upside down.
Yeah.
And, so negligence at the very least and malice, I think we're leaning in the malice category.
Well, and I was going to ask a follow-up question. What's been the most redeeming story that you've heard out of all of these cases researching animals and UFO encounters?
That I have not looked at it that. I don't know that I've seen a redeeming case. There is a couple of cases where rectangular craft, which for some reason seem a little different, animals seem drawn to it, which may be good or bad. I don't know why they're being drawn.
Like in a playful drawn way or in a defensive drawn way.
No, more in a I need to get close to this.
Yeah, like chasing a car.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Only it doesn't have wheels and it's hovering.
Yeah. But that
Right.
instinct to chase,
Yeah.
to go
There's
after
a
that.
handful of cases where the animals seem, but yet there was a case in Florida where the person felt euphoric. The animals, a cat and a dog, they were drawn towards this craft. They didn't reach it, which is probably a good thing, because in the ensuing days, the woman started feeling sick, nausea, hair falling out, radiation.
Yeah, very
signs.
Cash Landrum.
There you go. So was this vehicle trying to draw them to it for nefarious reasons, or was it something innocent, but yet had they gotten closer?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know that I could say there is a redeeming case where, they've done great things for this dog or cat.
Yeah, and that's just it. Once again, there are numerous cases with humans where they've been randomly healed of something, or they even come back with the ability to help heal people.
Exactly.
And that's what I was curious about. Were there cases like that with animals where I mean, of course, their life has changed. On occasion, the physiology has changed to the worst.
Right. But that's an excellent point, something I hadn't considered. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't see... I will have to look deeper into, did it cure
because there's got to be a good one.
I would hope.
There's got to be a good one. And, you morbidly laugh about it. But, we have to try to see if there's any good that comes of it. Even we talk about it regularly with Sev Talk about the Experience or Resource Team and about how many people view their experience through the filter of life that they are living, be it addiction, abuse, things like that. And then as they get better in life, they view their encounter through a different lens and through a different filter and realize that it was not the abusive experience that they believed it was. Have you seen that in cases involving animals and human contact as well?
I've seen it with humans, but, given the nature of animals and trying to communicate, I haven't seen where they've viewed it better. But it reminds me of a case of a man who was having abduction experiences from a very young age, which were horrifying. But now that he's old, now he's on the other side of life, an older man, he looks at it as he believes he was healed during these sessions. And he said to me, it's like when you take a sick puppy to the vet. He said, they're terrified. They don't know what you're doing to them, but it's for their own
good.
Bingo.
It's for their own good.
So that's the way he has now come to look at that experience.
And that's a beautiful cathartic way to look at it, absolutely, especially if it's something that changed your life for the better and gave you a new open-minded, open-hearted way to view the world. Right. In your vast realm of experience investigating beyond the animal UFO connection, just UFO cases in general, Linda, friend or foe? Which camp would you fall in?
I would tend to be in the foe camp. Even when people seem to be helped by it and may get some new abilities, you're taken against your will. Things are done without your consent. That's kidnapping and assault.
Yeah. Yes.
So, even if they're trying to do the right thing, they have really bad bedside manner.
Yeah. We got to work on the approach.
Yes. So I would have to go. Some things are clearly foe. Some things I think are clearly friend. But when you look at the entirety of it, from the people I've spoken to, it's in the negative. It's in the foe category.
Well, and that's what I explain on the show regularly. Typically at this point is when I pointed all my guest books on the wall behind me. And out of all these books, it's pretty rare that it starts off with a song. Most of the stories start off like a Disney movie.
Yes.
It's not a good first 5 minutes.
Right.
For somebody involved, it is not a good first 5 minutes of the movie. The story changes as it goes along. Characters evolve.
Right.
But that first 5 minutes is typically pretty traumatic.
Yes.
And like you're saying, that lands it pretty well in the foe category when it is a traumatic experience to begin with. So, Linda, let everybody know where they can go to find your work, where they can go to, of course, other than our store, we'll be adding all of your books to our online store as well, but let them know where they can follow you and catch up with your work.
If you're interested in my UFO books, they're all on Amazon. And I have a podcast. It's called UFO Headquarters.
Great.
It's on Hudson River Radio, but, every podcast platform known to mankind. So you can listen to it there. You can get in touch with me if you have cases. I'd love to hear if people have animal reaction stories. So I'm out there. I'm on Facebook. I have Hudson Valley UFOs Facebook. I have an Animal Reactions Facebook page. So I can only do what I do when witnesses are willing to speak to me.
That's right.
So I'm
That's
very
right.
grateful for the community we have who is willing to share.
Absolutely. That is the beautiful thing about right now at this point in humanity. We are hitting a huge catharsis with sharing and opening up and the hearings, everything going on. So it's absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I can't wait to hear you speak and hear your
great.
presentation. While you are online, checking out everything from Linda Zimmerman, everybody, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is the website. That's where you can like, subscribe, share. That is where you can submit your story. CuriousRealm.com/story is our experiencer page. If you have had experience with UFOs, aliens, if you've had an encounter with cryptids or Bigfoot, feel free to give us your experience. You can leave your evidence, videos, audio. We'll use it on the show and present your evidence to our experts and see if we can get you some answers. Stay tuned through these commercial breaks. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023 right here in Covington, Kentucky, right after this. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realms continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023, coming to you from Covington, Kentucky. Our guest in this segment is the amazing Earl Grey Anderson. He is the state director of MUFON in California. You were the field investigator of the year last year as well, correct?
Oh, thank you.
If I recall correctly from Symposium.
It was something like that. Yeah. Volunteer of the year, I think it was. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of people misunderstand and really don't understand, is that there ain't a paid person in MUFON. Like, it's all operating costs, and aside from that, everybody is a volunteer. Every field investigator, every state director that's here attending meetings, all volunteer. And that's really, really important to get across because there are so many others out there that are not in that way. And when you give to MUFON, like, this is what it's going to. It's going to field investigators. It's going to training processes, things like that. Even the new amazing MUFON University that Mindy Topfist is spearheading. I cannot wait for that to launch. I'm getting ready to go through field investigator training myself.
Good for you.
Very excited for that. I'm in the Austin area. There are not a lot of us right there.
We need you. We need you.
Exactly. And, you're also on the Experiencer Resource Team, which I am hugely, hugely a fan of. We have Sev Talk on the show regularly. She's been coming on for years and years. And to know that team has come about and exists is fantastic. Let's get into that a little bit because MUFON, of course, is known as the scientific endeavor, has been since 1969. Really the first people to put forth a unified reporting system across everywhere. This is how we take a report. This is how we bring in evidence. Very scientific in that right. The Experiencer Resource Team hits a different side of the UFO gym, so to speak. So let's get into that a little bit, Earl, and how you came to MUFON to begin with.
I'd love to talk about that. And I'm so proud of the ERT. That's our little acronym. It was originally the Experiencer Research Team, right? MUFON is about research, and I think that we're the best in the world, as you were saying.
I would venture
volunteers.
To say. Yep.
We're in this for love of the phenomenon. But we became the Experiencer Resource Team because that better explained exactly what we do. It served a very personal purpose in my own life because I had an experience with our visitors.
Yeah,
I'd been trying the sort of like the CE5 meditation contact thing, and I was kind of being flip about it. I was a new field investigator. It was about 8 years ago, and it worked maybe a little too well. because I wound up having entities literally come through the wall.
Wow.
Which is scientifically
Earl.
inexplainable.
Earl. Wow. And
there was nobody to tell. Okay,
Yeah.
nobody, because it was about research, and I kind of told my state director about it, and he, God bless him, Jeff Krause, he's one of my dearest friends, and still, I consider him my original mentor. But he didn't have a background in the experiencer phenomenon. And when I told him that this had happened, he didn't really know what to say.
Sure.
I think that he felt uncomfortable with it. I felt uncomfortable. There was no place to go. There was no answers out there.
there's no nuts and bolts to it. It's not like going and taking a soil sample or reading or anything like that.
It's physical.
Yeah.
But it's also it's psychological as well.
And very spiritual in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to how you process experience. The numerous experiencers I've talked to, it's the fact of it steals their life in a different way, whether positive or negative at the beginning.
Dr. John Mack from Harvard, who was head of the psychology department and one of the first guys to take the experiencer phenomenon seriously, he came up with the term ontological shock for those who have had this. And it's a very specific form of PTSD that people who have experienced contact have. And what it means is that it's sort of like we have our idea of reality, and we've lived in this all of our lives with our concepts of it, and that is pulled out from under you like a rug.
Yeah.
And I know personally the way I felt. I felt completely ungrounded. I felt like lost in space.
Yeah.
In the movie 2001, where you see Frank Poole, his body is spinning around, and there's nothing to latch on to. That's how I felt, and how all experiencers feel, whether they've had a benevolent experience or something more malign.
Yeah.
And I felt confused. And there was no place to go.
Yeah, and even the fact of talking with family about it, it does a number on a lot of people.
There's a
Earl.
ridicule factor.
Yeah, and I mean, even a loving wife, things like that. Like these things can drive wedges in families. The example I give all the time is Terry Lovelace.
Yeah.
Like he and his EMT buddy. Like when you ride as an EMT with someone, that's like riding like a cop.
Yep.
Like that is your partner, man. You are in the trenches. You see things. And they both had that experience, and it drove a wedge between them to the point that they eventually never spoke again.
That happens.
And it happens in families. It happens to a lot of people,
Sure
sadly,
does.
because it's hard to come forward. It can be hard to tell your experiential story.
Well, what happened for myself is that I talked with Peter Robbins about it, who's he had worked with Bud Hopkins, and he was helpful. But again, I was a researcher myself, and but I knew about Kathleen Martin. I knew the Betty and Barney Hill history that she had. She was their niece. And I eventually contacted her. She was the head of the ERT at that time. And we had lunch together. It was actually at the very first Alien Con in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
We met for lunch, and I told her what had happened to me. And rather than eye rolling or putting me under lights and a camera trying to find out, lie detectors, she was a non-judgmental listener. And she had heard this story before, and she was able to give me answers, and I finally felt some grounding, that I wasn't alone in this weird, strange strangest element to this phenomenon. And I'll say, I don't think that our visitors are here to do air shows. They'll do them.
Oh, sure.
But they're here, it's a personal phenomenon. I think that they're trying to actually change humanity at a very basic level, because we're way up here technologically, but we're still acting like a band of
children,
renegades,
straight children, straight children with matches.
And the best way, I think what they do is that they hit you hard right up first, scares the hell out of you, but then people, what's very strange is that people start getting downloads of arcane information. And it changes a person, and I think that they're trying to perhaps save humanity in this way, and it's one-on-one.
Yeah, and it is very much the way it's been described to me by experiencers, the fact of the box is opened.
Yes, Pandora's box.
Yeah,
it can't be closed.
Well, it's the fact of you've been living in a box.
Yeah.
And you never realized it.
Exactly.
And the box is open now, and there is a whole world that you were not aware of.
And it could be this beautiful transformative thing.
Sure.
And that's what it became for me.
Yeah.
But it took that that non-judgmental listener who, and she introduced me to other people that had been through the same thing. And after about an hour conversation, I mentioned to Kathleen, I said, I might actually want to join the ERT. I have a background in healthcare and psychology, and she, maybe, could I have like an interview or something? And she starts laughing, and she looks at me. She said, "What do you think we've been doing for the last hour?"
Yeah.
Shakes my hand, says, "Welcome to the ERT."
That's Kathleen.
Yeah, God love her.
She's an amazing individual, and one of those that I quote all the time on the show. That her aunt Betty Hill told her, like, honey, this, and at a young age, honey, this ever happens to you, you keep your mouth shut.
Oh yeah.
Don't you tell anybody. This will ruin your life.
Yeah. It often does that. I mean, it certainly did that for the Hills.
Absolutely. And, it was a much rougher time for experiencers. They were brave beyond belief to come out with their experience. And so much of their case is still like mind-numbing and jaw-dropping. When you start looking at DNA evidence off dresses and just the star system to begin with, and the fact that we didn't even know about it.
Yeah, Zeta Reticuli, I think. Yeah. The astronomer found exactly where they were coming from. They were showed a star. Betty was showed a star map.
Yeah.
And the astronomer was able to figure out what stars she was looking at in this 3D sort of, holographic image. Back in 1961, they didn't
know what a hologram was.
Nope.
The Who wasn't even using lasers yet.
No, won't get fooled again.
That's right. But in all sincerity, when it comes to experience, your experience, Earl, what was your sensation like as the experience happened to you? Because like you said, this was an invited experience for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yet still a frightening one.
Yes, it was. I was very naive. I had read, the literature. I had read Bud Hopkins.
Sure.
I had read, I think, mostly... I think Turner, I had read her Carla Turner's book.
Okay.
But, just enough where I had a smattering and an understanding of it. And what I was hoping for was I would meet, like, Valiant Thor or the tall...
Sure.
The tall Nordics, and that they would take me on a ride and show me, the answer to the cosmos.
Yeah.
And instead, what I got the little gray... I sound like the girl from Saturday Night Live, But anyway, but I got the... My wife always brings that up, and it's a laugh.
Well,
for us.
there I was.
But but it was like four of the little gray guys. I mean, they opened a hole in the wall and they came through. Right, there was no taking me away anywhere. They do house calls, apparently,
Yeah.
and that's what I got. They took blood, and they took blood, and they kept taking blood. And I'm trying to communicate with them, and they're non-communicative. They were not communicating back.
Interesting.
So I started getting scared. I thought I was going to be like one of those cows that they find alongside the road, because they weren't giving me the calming message.
Exsanguinated.
Yeah, that's exsanguinated, exactly. But what I mean, they took, I think, energy and blood, and that blood is DNA. I mean, I mentioned to somebody they didn't take my DNA. It's like, well, what do you think blood is, Earl? Yeah. I had somebody that had written papers on cancer treatment and things like that, and so a serious person, it's like they took your DNA. They took a whole lot of it, you know. And then they left the same way that they came in. They kept staring at me. The room was still flooded with light, but they were drawn backwards, almost as though like they were on ice skates, or I mean, I think they must have been floating like a millimeter off the floor or something. And they just stood there, and they pulled back. The wall closed back up again, and that was my experience. It scared it. I went into fetal position. I mean, first of all, I screamed, I yelled, I shook my wife, who was dead to the world through the whole thing. She had her own experience.
Were you able to move or anything like that? No.
After they left, it still took about 5 minutes before I could move. And I'm a retired nurse right now. I was still working as a nurse then, and I took care of quadriplegics, and that's the one thing I don't want to be ever, But they rendered me quadriplegic for this, and I understand, I mean,
sure.
I would have fought back. I would. I mean, they looked quite fragile, actually. You could have broken their neck probably by grabbing them, and. But, I mean, they were all business. And the small grays, I think that they act robotic, and maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe they're biological robots that are churned out for a job,
Recently at the remote viewing conference, I was speaking with a pretty famous remote viewer, not to be named, who was telling me that he has remote viewed the fact that the grays specifically, that yes, some of what we have is reverse engineered technology, but specifically given to us by them because they have bred themselves to a point, Earl, that they are no longer individual. Creativity does not exist in their culture. Well, it's also the fact of they have this amazing technology, but because they are of hive mind, they have no way to come up with new application for the technology. They've lost all creativity and individuality. So they're using us and giving us the technology as a conduit to come up with new uses for their own technology.
Well, that makes sense.
It's like, that is actually brilliantly simple and amazing. And when you think about the concept of the grays and the idea that, yes, they are of hive mind, most of the time, whenever you hear the stories, whenever you hear accounts of them, things like that, it really does make a lot of sense.
It does. Well, my experience didn't end there. This seemed, what I started noticing was, first of all, I started experiencing synchronicity after synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences would happen. My intuition went through the roof. I was able to connect the dots from case to case. It made me a better field investigator is what it did.
Awesome.
It raised my consciousness level as well as my vibration. I mean, we hear that a lot. That's part of the trifecta of messages people are left with is raise your vibration. The other two is stop trashing the world and nuclear weapons will destroy you. Stop, using them. But the other things, they call it the Valet Davis effect, where an experiencer is oftentimes left with gifts that we often attribute to the beings themselves. Maybe they're turning us into aliens, kind of,
Sure.
And it's not a bad change. I mean, and it became this compassionate thing.
Were you intuitive before?
Not like that.
Not
no.
like that?
No. It seems like, I feel like they activated something that was there.
Well, and one of the topics I've been bringing up regularly on the show is the idea of, yes, people being affected by their experience, having long-lasting effects, whether they be health effects, whether they be a vibrational shift. And when you're talking about that kind of technology, even the kind of technology that it would take to open up a portal in a wall.
Yeah.
It's
real. I can tell you.
That is some high vibrational technology that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And much like if I took a earth magnet and stuck it here next to my mechanical watch, it doesn't have to touch it. It just has to be in the field of it for those cogs to become magnetized and to change and be affected permanently.
What a wonderful, wonderful allegory. Absolutely. That's exactly what happened.
Anybody in the presence of that technology, the way you vibrate and the way your molecules move, they're going to change.
Yeah.
They're going to have a physical change to them.
Now, I think a lot of experiencers that they go through this horror. It's like a Buddhist monk will hit the new acolyte in the back with the blunt end of the sword.
Yeah.
It seems like they're going to be killed. It certainly hurts, but then that stops them in their tracks. And then they're finally able to stop thinking their old thoughts, and they're able to learn this new way of living. And it seemed like it was something similar that happened to me. But I think that some experiencers, they never get past that fight-flight reaction.
Fight, flight, or freeze. People forget the other F, the freeze.
You're right.
There's the freeze,
deer in the headlights.
The deer in the headlights of what is going on. I don't know how to react. Yeah. And that is more than frequently the case with anything paranormal, is that the freeze takes over, and frequently you can't even process the situation, much less what you're seeing. You're lucky if you remember gross detail or fine detail instead of gross detail.
Yeah.
Now, as far as experiences, it seems very common that experiences run in familial lines.
Yes, they do.
That once somebody has contacted, other people in their family tend to be contacted. You actively just had that situation happen to you.
Yes.
Like within the last 24 hours.
Yes. Well, to start with my mother, she was in officialdom, and she actually worked in a deep underground base back in the 1950s.
A noodle in the alphabet soup.
Yes, and she and that when I was 5 years old, she thought I was safe, that I would forget, right? And she told me where she had worked, and she told me, the addendum to the conversation was, and oh, by the way, UFOs are real, son, and life in the universe isn't abstract. We know. We've already met them. They're never going to tell the public. So my mom had an experience when she was a young girl with an intelligent Foo fighter, is what I think of it as, where it waited for her. It came into their screened-in porch in Iowa, hovered over her sister, hovered in front of my mom. My mom was awake.
Wow.
And then it pushed its way back through the screened-in porch. And my mom got up and she ran after this. It waited for her in a cornfield, like 30 feet in the air. And when she got under it, she just looked up at it, and it just stayed there, hovered for a few seconds, and then popped like a soap bubble. And that was a contact experience. And this often happens with people. They experience differently than we do, and I think that they knew that my mom was going to be working in officialdom. She knew that she was going to be involved in all that. So that was the first contact experience that I know of in our family. There may have been more. So, and then I had my experience. I wondered, somebody last night asked me, so have anybody in your family, like your children or your grandchildren, have they seen a UFO or had an experience yet? And I had to answer, no, not yet. And I'm not sure why not. My son really wants to see a UFO. Yeah. He saw a drone on flash mode once, and he was all excited, and I had to burst his bubble.
Yeah. I break a lot of hearts on social media, Earl.
Oh, me
I break
too.
a lot of hearts.
I hate it.
It breaks me up inside.
Well, I got a phone call from my son this morning. For him in Sacramento, it was 2:30 in the morning. For me here in Kentucky, it was 5:30 in the morning. I was getting ready to...
You're a good father to pick up the phone at 5:30
Oh, I thought it was probably a butt call, right? But I did pick it up anyway. And I was going to be, hosting the Experiencer Resource Team's workshop that we had, where people are asking questions and telling their stories. And so anyway, my son, he's on the other end, and he's all kind of breathless, saying, "Oh my God, Dad! Oh my God! I'm seeing one finally." My girlfriend and I, we were meditating, doing kind of a sky watch, and these two bright objects, I thought it was Venus at first, maybe another planet, but then they got brighter and came closer and closer. And he said, "It's still happening. They are spinning around each other. They're doing like a light show for me."
Wow.
And then he said that they pulled way back into the distance. And then they came back again, and then they were doing the same, and like the falling leaf motion that we see in these cases. And I was so happy to tell my son, "You know what, kiddo? That is not a drone. That's not SpaceX. Congratulations.
Yeah.
May the circle be unbroken."
That's it. Well, and like you were saying before the show, the fact of these are very personal experiences. When you have a sighting like that, it's not like a mass sighting. Just before we came here, my wife's cousin called me up. Was like, "You're the only person I think I could tell this to." And told me about an experience that she had the night before in Massachusetts on her balcony. Seeing something come within 150 feet of her house, a huge orb.
Wow.
Disappear, come back.
Like my son.
I told her, I was like, "You need to go on to MUFON.com immediately.
Yeah.
You need to put your sighting in." And honestly, folks, it's more about confirming somebody else's sighting than it is about confirming yours. And I think that that's really the important thing, is to understand that when you give your story, even I had a guest, Father James Cloud, comes on. He's an exorcist. He gave his account from like 1973.
Wow.
When he was a kid.
Oh my goodness.
It changed his life. It was something that he's never really been able to get out of his head, and he was like, "I just decided it was time for me to tell my story."
Wow.
And apparently there were a couple other sightings nearby that happened. Like, all this stuff is cataloged by you guys, everything else, so it can all be cross-referenced by date, location, direction, all that kind of stuff. So it is never too late to give your sighting to MUFON.
I had one case that came in that was from the 1950s. It was two little boys at the time playing toboggan with a cardboard box down ice plant, down an embankment. And they're doing this, and they see this silver chromed, it looked like a missile, but it was hanging 7 feet off the ground. The back of it was just cut off straight, like somebody had cut it with a laser saw or something. And they watched this thing, and they're waving at it. Okay, the kids are, they're kids. They're kids.
They're kids.
Look, oh wow, look, they're space people. They're waving at it. They go back up to the top of the hill, and they toboggan down again, and they watch this thing go to a 90-degree angle and shoot off. Well, this is a historic case. We're talking 1950s. You may not think that's relevant. 2 months later, I got another case that came in from San Diego. It was two old codgers my age, right? I'm 65, and proud of it. But they were riding their motorcycles up in this mountainous area, and they had the exact same experience. Same vehicle. This thing was silver. It was chromed. It looked like a missile. It looked like it had been cut off on the back.
Wow.
It was 7 feet off the ground. They stopped their motorcycles. They were standing there agog watching this thing.
Yeah.
Again, it went up to a 90-degree angle, and it shot off. Now, those are if not for that guy coming forward, 60 years later telling his story, I would have no reference for that sighting that happened, like now it's been 2 years ago, right? But this is why the historic cases are very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're hugely
It's a continuum,
important.
you know?
Yeah, and I mean, even the fact out of the MUFON bookstore yesterday, I bought this book, Natural Phenomena. And it was, I'll have to show it to you. It's pretty epic.
Yeah,
man.
I want to see.
It's literally like a binder full of studies. Of
I want
ball
that.
lightning, things like that, like back to the 1890s, man.
Oh, yeah.
1700s.
Oh.
These reports.
Chris Auerbach wrote a wonderful book with Jacques Vallée, Wonders in the Sky, and it goes back to, brings up the Nuremberg sighting from, 1300s.
Yeah, the wood cuttings and everything else have been done of. The huge battle.
Yeah, this is no new phenomenon.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. Like whenever I talk about crop circles on my show, the example I give is whenever someone's like, they were proven to be fake. Well, some of them were proven to be fake by two dudes who said that they faked them. However, those go back to the 1500s, known as devil circles. And what's funny is in the 1500s, I think they were much more worried about not getting the Black Plague and actually living than to destroy half a field of crop for a prank.
Yeah.
Like you'd have been burned at the stake by the community if you did that.
Exactly. No. This isn't, our visitors' first rodeo. I don't think that this is the first time that they've tried to uplift, a civilization that was going in the wrong direction. And I think they've been here forever. I mean, Giorgio could sometimes, stretch a little bit, but on that we both agree. They've been here a long time. Yeah. A couple more questions before we let you go. Number one,
where do you fall in the camp of friend or foe?
Oh.
Earl.
I turn it back on ourselves. Our humanity is humanity friend or foe? Are we good or evil?
Yeah.
We fall somewhere in the middle, usually, right? I mean, we have our angels and our devils. You look at our history. You turn on the news.
Good actors, bad actors.
You'd think that we were all demons turning on the news. But, we have our Gandhis and we have our Hitlers, and I think that it may be the same thing in the greater cosmos.
Sure.
But I do have the feeling that the good guys are kind of overseeing things. And I think that, they've probably diverted asteroids that could have destroyed us at certain points. So I think ultimately it's good. That's where I align with that. But it's not all, Reese's Pieces, right? I mean,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's some dark and scary stuff out there.
I say it regularly on the show. Despite where anybody comes to with their experience, paranormal, ET, UFO, cryptid, what have you, there's very few of those stories that start off with a song, Earl. They all more start off like a Disney movie. The first 5 minutes is not pleasant for somebody.
Yeah. Bambi's mom.
Yeah. It starts off with some kind of trauma.
Well, what I was saying earlier about the Shaolin monk, to get new acolytes' attention, will take the blunt end of the sword and have them get into position like they're going to be beheaded. It's part of the initiation process, and there's fear involved, and there's pain.
Yeah.
But that stops the person in their tracks,
Well,
and then they're open to this transformation.
Even whenever you look at Masonic ritual, I'm a Knight of Columbus. Even whenever you look at our initiations, whenever you look at just about any initiation into a knowledge society, so to speak, there is some kind of either pain, personal pain involved to get to that point, be it through ritualistic ingestion of something or like you're saying,
no pain, no gain, right?
I mean, even the fact of them knocking you in the head, like Hiram Abiff, whenever you join, like, you're dead now, you'll be reborn into a new knowledge. And I think that's very much, at least what I've gathered of the experiencer side of things with UFOs, that very much seems to be the message.
Yes.
Is that they eventually realize the fact that they are reborn and have a chance to do things in a totally different way now, that they've never been able to do it.
And I think that that's probably the gist of hopefully what I'm doing out there.
Yeah.
Is I want to help people get past that fight, flight, and frozen that you were talking about.
Yeah.
The 3 Fs. You know?
Yeah.
There's probably a fourth one, but we can't say it on that. But you know, I think that's probably the gist of what I'm, because a lot of people get stuck in that fear phase, and they never get past it. But there's this whole world that will open up for you if you've gone through this. And just speaking personally, I mean, my son's sighting is so meaningful.
It's beautiful, man.
And I feel like
just to see your joy for him experiencing that is beautiful.
In Yiddish, they have the term cavelling, and I've been cavelling all morning.
That's awesome.
You know?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
One last question, because you did say that your experience was self-initiated. I've always been curious about the CE5 protocol. I've got the app. I've never been to a CE5 gathering. I've spoken to numerous people that have taken part in the CE5 protocols and been there and had experiences even. But where do you come down on the concept of CE5 experience and what it is that the ERT does? Have you guys seen an uptick in cases because of CE5?
I think so.
Have you seen?
There's been an uptick, and we're very, very busy. I mean, you know, we'll
you
get
guys are
like
insanely
100
busy
cases
with
in
ERT.
a month. You know,
it's
Dr. George Medich. I love the man. He is our fearless leader, and he doesn't get enough kudos out there. But you know, he's usually kind of quiet, but he's just a powerful guy, knowledgeable guy, knows more about the experiencer phenomena than probably anybody out there, than Kathleen Martin, and he was Kathy's choice. Yeah, and. We were just talking about the CE5 thing this morning at the meeting. Somebody brought up Dr. Greer and all that, and our feel, George and I are pretty well aligned about this. That yes, it does work. Yes, you can meditate and you can draw them to yourself, and you can do it yourself. You don't have to go and pay thousands of dollars to do it. But yeah, it does work. I mean, I'm living testimony to the fact that it does work.
Well, and you know, I guess one of the things that we talk about on the show regularly is the fact of charging an atmosphere, so to speak. The idea of are we possibly manifesting things because of our intent?
Yeah, well, you're bringing up my dearest buddy, you know, Greg Bishop's idea of co-creation. Yeah, and I absolutely I see a lot of truth in that idea that the manifestations that people have are oftentimes they induce themselves, but it's also coming from this other side.
Sure.
And it's sort of like where we meet with this other.
Well, and the example I give is remote viewing. Quite literally, the whole concept that consciousness is non-local. That's physics. Can visit and view anything. Like my audience may be tired of it, but I bring up the 9th grade science concept all the time of we are all 90% empty space.
Yes, absolutely.
This is an agreed upon illusion by all means of physics.
In the universe is connected with every other point in the universe. That was Ben Rich, who is head of Lockheed Skunk Works, what he said about ESP.
Well, even the root, the paper that Hal Puthoff put out that began the work of remote viewing was the fact that when scientists went home and thought about their experiment, that they were affecting their experiment in the lab.
Yeah, that's true. So you are not outside of the experience.
No different than
you're not looking
we're getting ready for a paranormal experience. We're getting hyped. Are we actively charging that location that we are going to?
Yeah, I believe so.
And I think even as an investigator, you have to come dispassionately to the points of datum and add them to your data set. You can't go in, and it's hard. It's hard to become dispassionate. It's hard to disconnect yourself from the moment, to disconnect yourself in a way from somebody's experience, to look at it from an outside point of view, even when you're an experiencer, Earl. I think that makes it even harder.
Yeah,
because you've got to drop your own bias.
You have to try, as to your best ability, to not bring in your own judgments and ideas. Yeah, because that can affect the results that you get.
Absolutely.
And what I tell a lot of my new field investigators is that just remember that if you poke at the phenomena, don't be surprised if it pokes back.
Yeah, it's a fully responsive phenomena, and that is exactly what they're doing on Blind Frog Ranch, on Skinwalker Ranch. All that is.
But there's a beauty to it.
They're poking.
Yeah,
it's
they are.
Interesting to see the pokes back that happens. So.
Being poked back. Absolutely.
Earl, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to finally sit down and talk to you like this. I've got to have you on the show regularly.
Yeah,
look there at the camera. Let everybody know where they can go to get involved. Let them know where they can go to contact the ERT if they are an experiencer.
Yes. If you go to MUFON.com, MUFON, it's a mutual UFO network. You'll be given a choice, 2 buttons that you can click on: report a UFO or report an entity. If the things that I've been talking about sound familiar to you, click on report an entity. You'll get a set of questions, and somebody like myself, or maybe even me, will get a hold of you. A non-judgmental listener who is well aware that this is a real thing will take you seriously, can put you in contact with a support group if you desire that. We have a list of vetted hypnotherapists if you have missing memories from missing time experience. And I highly recommend it because the ERT is just an amazingly educated, but yet magically just compassionate, wonderful, open group of people. And so that's how you can do it. And I recommend it. I wish that I had known about that. Yeah. I wish it had been available 8 years ago when I was so confused. Yeah. But it is there, and it's for you. It's for you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again for your time today during this very busy
Chris.
MUFON Symposium. It's been
best
fantastic.
one ever. Yeah.
It's been fantastic. It's a great crowd. Yeah. While you're online checking out everything from Earl Grey and MUFON at MUFON.com, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can listen to the show. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe, share. That's where you can find the store full of all the books from our guests. It's where you can find our experiencer page. CuriousRealm.com/story. If you're an experiencer, if you're a government whistleblower, if you have had an encounter with cryptids or aliens, give us your experience. We have a forum there where you can share your information, share your evidence as well, and we will present it to our professionals and see if we can get you answers for your case. Stay tuned through these commercial messages, folks. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of Day 2 of the MUFON Symposium here in Covington, Kentucky, right after this. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023 here in Covington, Kentucky. Our guest in this segment is Ray Szymanski. He is the author of The 50 Shades of Grey, as well as Swamp Gas My Ass, and Alien Shades of Grey. He is a former Air Force employee who worked for the government for many years, right down the road here at Wright-Patterson Airforce Base, correct?
Yes, about an hour's drive north on I-75.
Wow. And what exactly did you do at Wright-Patterson? What was your job for so many years?
Well, I retired in 2011 as a senior scientist / senior engineer. So when you first start at Wright-Pat, you're taken under the wing of the senior people. So one of the things that I did was they would design circuits. I would lay out the circuit boards. I would load them with the components, and then the senior engineers would come along, and together we would test them. So it was a learning process.
Okay.
And some of those boards and designs eventually made their way into satellites, as an example. What
Sure.
type of satellites, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
So as you go along, you get more responsibility. And one of the longest running jobs I had was with the Ada Joint Program Office. Now, the Ada Joint Program Office was subsidized by the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering. And the purpose of that was to develop a singular programming language for real-time embedded weapon systems.
Ooh.
So anything shipborne or tank-borne or airborne would be developed in a programming language. And the reason they wanted to do that is because they had done a survey and determined that there were hundreds of different languages and dialects being used to program all the little, microprocessors that were coming into the fore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in order to financially make it cheaper, maybe to move people around dialect,
Yeah.
they could just all do Ada.
Yeah.
And so for 10 years, I worked for the Ada Joint Program Office developing test suites that would test the performance characteristics of some of the tools, the software tools used for Ada development.
Wow. Wow. And yeah, to know that they're all on the same programming language, make sure that there's no competition between components, things like that, that one component understands what the other component's doing.
Well, there
fully,
would be a
that kind of
compatibility
stuff.
issue there, but imagine you've got a team that you've trained and they've all learned Ada, because learning a new programming language can be easy for some. So if you have a singular programming language and you say, well, we only need 3 programmers now and we've got 10 on this missile program, let's move those free 7 up to maybe a tank program or some
Sure.
other program. So there's the keep the costs down, because the government is paying these people to learn Ada, and then if we have the same contractor or maybe the same group of contractors, we know and they know that we're going to use the singular programming language.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of advantages to doing that, and that was one of the largest jobs I did for a long span of my career. Basically,
Wow.
25% of my career.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, Wright-Pat is a huge R&D facility. They do tons of weapons design, all kinds of things. And of course, is famed for possibly being one of the locations of alien technology, alien bodies.
Let's open that can of worms.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and open it, because it's quite literally been an interesting conversation over the last year and a half, just since the last MUFON Symposium, where it was Friend or Foe 1.0. How is the media treated UFOs, UAPs, things like that? And even to see the one thing I brought up on the show regularly, to see the media's rapid turn and use of the word UFO denier. Like, randomly out of nowhere, it was like all these people who were once like, hey, look at Crazy Joe who's over there talking about his car stopped because of a UFO. Now we're using the term UFO denier suddenly. So it was funny to see that flip of the media, and it's been interesting to see the flip of our government, the flip of the Senate. The one thing I've been bringing up to people is, yes, let's forget little green men. Let's talk about monetary accountability. Were you cool with Iran-Contra? Were you cool with the Pentagon Papers that showed that there were these shifty things that went along to make money happen and get weapons somewhere else? Apparently, this whistleblower has said that there is something much bigger than that going on since 1939 with your money and your government, dealing with UFOs and UFO technology and possible recovered aircraft, things like that. So
Who would be that whistleblower?
that Grush.
Oh,
Grush. And the recent whistleblower testimonies that just happened, that was a big part of it. The fact of the money trails that lead through special projects, things like that, how things get compartmentalized, so that oversight committees don't know where that money goes.
now let's go back to a point that you brought up earlier, the Wright-Pat UFO connection.
Yes.
And you talked about advanced technologies. Well, for my entire career, I worked as an employee of Air Force Research Labs. So the Air Force has well, the labs used to be scattered. A lot of the consolidation has now happened at Wright-Patterson Airforce Base. They're leading edge. They're looking 30 years out and further. So could we have used some of the technology that was recovered in crash craft? It's definitely a possibility. Are we ready to release that? Do I know if they've done that? No, I don't know. Yeah. But there are stories that has happened. And let's touch upon the initial connection. Major Jesse Marcel, in a 1978 interview with Stanton Friedman, said, we recovered a crash craft, and those pieces went to Wright-Patterson Airforce Base. Now, that was 1978.
Yeah.
I entered Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1973. Now, it's 5 years before it went public. My mentor, the guy that was assigned to me and who I discuss extensively in my first book, 50 Shades of Grace, took me under his wing one day as we were going through a deserted hangar going to a business building, which was on the other end of our building. And he said, have you heard about our aliens? So I'm a co-op student from the University of Detroit, and I don't know aliens from Jack. So I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, there was a crash out west, and they recovered the craft, and that craft now sits at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It's being examined, and exploited. Well, it wasn't until 5 years later that Jesse Marcel and the world, through Stanton Friedman, let it be known that Wright-Pat had this distinct connection. How Al, who is my mentor, knew about this, I don't know, but I can say that Al went on to become a member of the Senior Executive Service. So at the time, he was a mid-level engineer. Now, the Senior Executive Service is the equivalent of a military general or an admiral. So the guy speaking to me about a alien crash craft connection 5 years before it came public went on to become a member of the Senior Executive Service. So I don't want to belabor the point, but again, this was somebody who went on to have a fabulous career.
Yeah.
It always bugged me. How did he know? And where did he get this information from? Was it a rumor that he just expanded upon, or he had a gut feel? I don't know. But there's been that long-standing connection between Wright-Patterson and, of course, the labs are there.
Yeah.
So in 1947, when that material was brought to Wright-Patterson, and we know it was because Jesse Marcel said it was, and the guy who was the chief of staff of the 8th Army Air Corps, where that stuff came to initially before it went to Wright-Pat. And he signed an affidavit, so we know it went to Wright-Pat. It went to the Materials Directorate, probably in a little briefcase. They opened it up and they said, tell us what you know about this. We'll come back in 6 months and give us a report. And then there was only one copy made. And that's what needs to be tracked down. Where did that singular report go on the official Roswell crash wreckage? We know who did it. We know where it is somewhere.
Yeah.
But there's probably only one copy.
Man, that's just remarkable to think about. Because, I mean, the concept of the Roswell crash, the idea of the Roswell crash has, of course, haunted ufology for decades, and is just now coming to light in a lot of ways. Once again, with the whistleblower testimonies, with the idea that, there are secret programs that back engineer things, that look at things. Much like Philip Corso said long ago, like lasers, fiber optics, things like that, all came from that technology and was back engineered. And to know, one of the things I bring up on the show regularly is the fact of any computer you go out and buy is 10 years old at a minimum by any military spec. It is old technology. They've already had that and used it, and they're in a different realm of technology than what we have on our commercial shelves.
It depends on the technology you're talking about. Sometimes the military is ahead, sometimes industry is ahead, and commercial. But I'll lay a story on you and your listening audience. There was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bill Edwards. Now, the world doesn't know Bill Edwards because what Bill Edwards did is he kind of brought the world into the solid state world, and he was the head of a division, I think it was called microelectronic circuits. And basically, when solid state first became a viable solution and was going to replace the vacuum tubes. Inside Air Force Research Labs, Bill Edwards was running a program to help accelerate that. And one of the groups he was working with eventually became known as Texas Instruments. And as everybody knows, TI was one of the very first to develop the integrated circuit.
That's right.
And it was Bill Edwards' group in conjunction with commercial entities who helped bring them from hard soldered pieces of silicon and wire to putting TI in business, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, the story is that I used to play basketball recreationally at Wright-Pat, and during our afternoon games, I would regularly go up against Bill Edwards. So I got to know him on the court, and he and I worked in the same building, only a floor apart. So after I retired and I was starting to develop my first book, I intercepted Bill Edwards at the gym. He's retired, I'm retired, so it's a little safety factor. And I wanted to revisit the mythology, we'll call it, of Colonel Corso and how he ceded the solid-state technology to Bell Labs and that it unstuck them from what they were doing. And at one point, they just couldn't get the doping right. It's doping is when you put like arsenic or something and it enables the carriers.
Yeah.
So as the story goes, they discovered by back engineering that they were using the wrong dopant, and then once they got the right dopant, then the transistor was born.
Yeah.
Well, I took that story to Bill Edwards because if anybody would know that, Bill would, because he worked that from day one.
Pioneered the transistor.
So I asked him a direct question, putting my long-standing, jump shot
on the line,
which I used to, in your face, Bill.
Yeah.
I put that at risk, and I told that backstory to him, and I asked him point blank, what is your take on this story that it was reverse engineering of alien artifacts that got Bell Labs over the hump and got you guys, because I knew his story, into the integrated circuit thing? And he just shook his head and he said, there are gaps in my knowledge, but I know I've had access to all of those root papers, and I would tell you that it was just hard work and human ingenuity that got us to where we are today. I don't see that as part of the story.
Yeah.
So for me, and again, I that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, there were some, how's your health and that sort of thing, enjoying retirement. But here was a guy, and I'm sure you can look him up in all the papers he wrote, that he basically told me point blank, no, I really think it was just because he was part of that hard work and that ingenuity.
Yeah.
So I don't want to throw cold water on it. I don't want to say it's the definitive answer, but this is a source that now you have information from that you can't get to, and that I had an opportunity to chat with only because I knew him from the gym.
Yeah, because you had a personal relationship with him to begin with.
Yeah, and then I would see him, and I knew guys that worked for him, and we would cross paths in the building.
Well, and, there's definitely that fact of, I can neither confirm nor deny that that's the case. Would have probably been the answer, were it the answer.
But he was open. He was open with me, and it was easily defensible.
Well,
and Bill was a straight shooter. He was a no nonsense guy.
Yep.
So for me, I took it at face value.
Well, and we have the conversation regularly when it comes to ancient sites, ancient aliens, things like that. That like we regularly dismiss the ingenuity of humanity, and they were hot on the trail of the transistor, and especially the miniaturization of the transistor from transistor radio to microchip. They were already on that path right up around that time. Miniaturization really helped that along, being able to throw thousands of transistors onto a chip.
Well, to bring the story to a close, a friend of mine, his name is Ray Rang. He was the historian from Air Force Research Labs after he retired. And Ray was a personal friend of mine. In fact, when he left staff, it was a promotion for me. He was leaving staff to go back to my home organization, and I was taking his place up on staff. So I was going to work indirectly for the head of Air Force Research Labs at the time. who was a general. It was called Wright Labs at the time. So Ray Rang was a personal friend. I had, again, retired, but I got a visitor pass to go back into the building where I knew Ray was working. I coordinated with him, and he is now writing all about the history of the Census Directorate where I worked, and they were having people come in and interviews and stories, and he's backfilling information he didn't have. He was going to write something for the archives. So I posed the same question to him. I said, now, I talked to Bill Edwards about this, and you're the historian, and I know you've got other insight. And I laid the story out about the transistors and everything else. And he goes, get out of my office. He literally, he didn't want to hear about aliens. He didn't care. He was just saying, Bill's story's my story. Get out of my office.
Yeah, like enough with that foolishness.
Never spoken to Ray Rang again. Never.
Oh my God.
And it's not my fault.
Yeah.
So, they shut the door on me.
Well, and granted, working in such a facility, having a career with such technology, what was some of the most amazing things, projects that you got to work on that you can talk about?
I would say, first of all, I mentioned the Ada thing, and if you use my last name and the name Ada is actually the Countess Ada, the world's first computer programmer.
Yeah.
Just type in Ada and my last name, and you'll see some public reports that I did because I guided this team, mostly PhDs from around the country. We met quarterly. We developed technology that actually got blended in on the international level. So a lot of my work is public. But some of my early work, I think, was the most interesting simply because they would bring something in and say, we need you to analyze this circuit board. We want you to take it and create a schematic. So I would get in there and I would have to read the board, lay out the traces, put the components in there, and then a senior scientist would come in and go, thank you very much, grab my stuff, and I'd never hear from him again. And
Wow.
And what I was told is, and I did this as a co-op student and as a young engineer because they would pay us overtime. And they wouldn't tell us who they were or where they came from, but our boss was involved in this, and he would say, it's an opportunity to get overtime money. You're coming in on a weekend. You're going to work in this vault. There's going to be somebody outside the door, somebody inside with you, and they're going to pull a card out of something, and then your job is to reverse engineer it. So I didn't analyze the circuitry, but I had to tell them. I had to go from the board and
the parts that are on it,
the pieces parts, and then create a diagram so they could see it. So I would, draw the resistor in there, the capacitors, the inductors, and if there was anything funky, and then you would read, if you could, read the values of the how many microfarads or the resistor, how many ohms and stuff, and then they would go in and check it, and then it's like, I thank you very much, and then maybe the next time you get a different board and you do the same thing. So knowing that I was doing a reverse engineer of sorts was really cool, but you had no other knowledge, and they just said, keep this to yourself, okay? So now it's 1973 to today. How many years was that? 50 years? It's who knows? It's space junk now.
Yeah.
But back then it was really exciting. So I think that was a cool part. And then eventually, you do executive things where I ran contracts for years and more of an engineering thing. And then I was selected to develop a base-wide wellness program for Wright-Patterson Airforce Base. I was responsible for improving the wellness of 12,000 base employees.
Wow.
And thousands of employees around the country that were satellite offices of Wright-Patterson Airforce Base. So for 2 years, I was a direct report to Colonel Spacey, who was the base commander. And I was a direct report at the same time to Joe Szymanski, who was the Air Force Research Lab executive director. We always have a general on the top, but the guy who does the work, the thunder and lightning, is the executive director. And at that time, Joe Szymanski granted me a 2-year executive loan to the 88th Air Base Wing Air Base Wing, so I was a direct report. And it was a fascinating job. I knew thousands of people. And we saved hundreds of lives by doing medical screenings, people that were on the verge of strokes and heart attacks with high blood pressure, high cholesterol. We screened them out, and we got them to take care of their issues.
Awesome.
In fact, Joe Shabika is one of our success stories. And that's why, I was working for him, doing it for Air Force Research Labs. And then we literally saved his life.
Wow.
Literally saved his life because we found him, and I can't go against HIPAA laws, but I can tell you that he had one of the highest blood pressures and highest cholesterol levels ever recorded by my medical staff.
Wow.
And so I called back where he came from Kirtland Air Force Base, and I talked to his secretary. And she goes, oh, yeah, Joe lost 50 pounds, but he would go to the Mexican restaurant across the street every day for lunch. And I go, you couldn't get a higher cholesterol
count.
Plus, he had some genetic things.
I'm from Texas. I love my Mexican food, but
know that. So that for me, that was one of the most outstanding jobs that I had because now I'm a GS-14.
Yeah.
I'm an executive level person, and all that technology is now behind me. So you just felt that of all the contributions I made, and I think I made a lot, that was the one that was the most palatable.
Okay.
Where people would come up to me and say, thank you for that screening, And then I took my husband, who's not an employee, I took him to get screened, and we found he had problems. And so that was just really exciting for me. The Air Force takes care of its people.
It does.
That's the message I want your viewers to understand.
Yeah.
The Air Force takes care of their people.
Awesome. And, right now a lot of the conversation is whistleblowers, technology, hidden government programs, things like that. What do you see for the coming future of disclosure, UFO, UAP studies, Ray?
That's a great question. I'm really bad at predicting.
That's okay.
And I'll tell you why, because I was on a radio show or a podcast maybe within the last, this would have to be, Swamp Gas My Ass came out in April of 2021, and 2 months later, the ODNI report came out that said, flying saucers are real, guys.
Yeah.
So it had to be a show prior to that disclosure, and I know the book hadn't come out yet. So let's say in January of 2021, somebody on the podcast asked me, in your lifetime, do you believe there's going to be disclosure? Yeah. And historically funny is I said, no. I mean,
I don't think so.
But I gave a cryptic answer like, there's going to be disclosure from the government, but not directly. And I was alluding to the fact of my new book coming out, and a full colonel, was telling his story about intercepting the 1966 swamp gas flying saucers over southeastern Michigan. That's what Swamp Gas My Ass is all about. So I knew that. I knew it was coming out soon. And so I made that little cryptic remark, kind of hedging my bets. But I couldn't have been more dead wrong about
the situation and what would ensue. Yeah.
So let me answer your question. Things are starting to avalanche. But there are dark forces about. There are people. There's only a single segment of the government that wants disclosure right now, and the dark forces are still afoot. So I think, can the dark forces be overcome? Because Congress goes, we want all this data. Well, look at Reagan couldn't get the data. Bush couldn't get both Bushes couldn't get the data. And
the congressman that said we will withhold your money is no longer on the panel, from what I understand. He said that, and about 2 weeks later, they're like, so we've got a new assignment for you, my friend. It's like...
Is this a form of Clinton side?
Yeah. It's kind of like they said, I'm sure you could tell us where they are, but the next day the moving vans would pull up, Like, it would all be moved as soon as you disclosed where it
Carter
was.
Carter didn't get
Yeah.
And I laughed when Hillary Clinton goes, yeah, if I'm elected president, I'm going to tell him. Go, yeah, you can promise all
They
you
are
want."
telling a temporary employee, Jack. You are a temporary employee, man. You do not have a need to know.
and people know where you live.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, I thought, I don't want to predict, but I
Yeah.
would say, I have my own personal feelings about this, and that is, are we really ready? Are we really ready for this? And just talking about some of my personal encounters with people and talking to them, my family, for example, other people who go, "Oh yeah, Ray, you wrote these books." They don't want to hear it. They're like, "Nah, nah, 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 nah."
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're ready, and so I'm not going to be like the guy pounding the table. Steve Bassett, we got to have the disclosure.
I just had him on about a month ago, and he was like, "You can be ready for Big D disclosure by the end of summer." So I'm looking for when people stop wearing white. That's my official
Labor Day.
Labor Day. By Labor Day, he said. When the pools close and the kids go back to school, we'll know. But yeah, and I will take Steve Bassett's word as he is the lobbyist of lobbyists when it comes to that. He has been lobbying for disclosure and opening things for a long, long time. But
What will it take? What will it take for people to believe, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's pictures of flying saucers in the congressional hearings.
They say,
What do they need?
We needed to land on the White House lawn. How about a fleet of them flying over the White House and pictures of it?
1952.
How about that?
It would happen in 52.
Yeah, like we were on alert for weeks. People flying over the
so
Capitol.
that's what happened.
Yeah.
What will it take?
more do you need?
These guys are showing, well, we got some anomalous metal. Well, that's fine, but where did it come from? I bury a piece of metal in the desert for 50 years. Regardless of how it started, it's going to be anomalous when you pull it out. There's going to be some seepage. So
There's going to be mineralization that gets sucked into pores, all kinds of things, and
what will it take for people to go, all right, you got me,
Well, and once again, I talk about my dad because he is one of them that's like, "Oh, little green man, what are you talking about? You're crazy." All right, well, let's just talk about fiscal accountability because once again, were you cool with the Pentagon Papers that said that we went into Vietnam under totally false pretenses to make millions of dollars and sell
helicopter
opium
connection Yeah, right.
Were you okay with Iran-Contra? Because apparently from what Grush is saying, there has been a money shift going on since 1939 into the realm of billions and billions of dollars.
Well, I have a personal story about that.
Please.
I spent 2 weeks in an office in the Pentagon, and the office is the liaison office to Congress.
Oh.
So they have a book there, like, does the Air Force still have monkeys? You go to the book under M for monkeys, and you look at it, and you see what the current posture is on the Air Force. So the representative gets contacted, and he wants an answer. So you go to the book, and you Xerox a letter, you fill in the blanks to address the issue, and it says whatever is in the book, because that's the Air Force response. So I spent 2 weeks there, and they were showing me around, and I look, and a lady that I was being introduced to had a picture of Fawn Hall, the Major Secretary, on her wall. And I thought, well, this has got to be some kind of local Washington, D.C. joke, because this is the Pentagon, right? And I said, this is really dumb, and I know this is personal, and I know I just met you, but isn't that Fawn Hall? She goes, absolutely. And I said, now I got another dumb question. Why do you have a picture of Fawn Hall in your cubicle? She goes, because she's my sister.
Wow.
And then she and I had a very interesting conversation about a lot of stuff.
Wow.
And so you never know where the next tidbit of information is going to come from.
Yeah.
So maybe Fawn Hall's going to come out and tell her story.
We get deathbed confessions regularly. We get books, interviews from people, as they leave this world that reveal all kinds of things, Ray.
So there I was, and I went, "Hey, man, thank you very much." And
Wow.
and I didn't even ask her, like, why was she burning stuff? And
Yeah.
I didn't know.
What was that
Did
about?
she tell you she was a good shredder? And, no, I just went, I'm really sorry about asking that question.
Best data collector ever. Ray, I want to thank you so much for taking the time, Ray. It was
Okay.
more than a pleasure chatting with you. Let the audience know where they can go to pick up your books. Of course, other than the Curious Realm store. We'll be adding them all to the Curious Realm store, things like that. But let them know where
Wonderful.
they can go to follow your work and keep up with everything you do.
Okay, great. The books are available on Amazon, so you can find them there. I have a friend who runs a bookstore in a small town in Michigan. It's called the Fenton Open Book, like Fenton, Missouri, except this
Okay.
is in Fenton, Michigan. It's called Fenton's Open Book, and I have a connection there because my mother is in a home not too far away. So regularly I will drop off a box of autograph copies
Nice.
for her. And the final place is, and this is a secret now a widely known secret, if you want autograph copies and get them online, you can go to the National Museum of the United States Air Force. And in their bookstore and in their gift shop, I live 5 minutes away from
What?
the museum. I cart every month. I take a box of books there and I dump them off at the
The
museum.
Air Force actually has, the Air Force Museum is actively selling your books.
And they're actually selling book 1 and book 3. Book 2, which was about a family who's had a lifetime of alien contact, was just something that they could
So
not
a little too
swallow.
much.
So I've been doing
That's
that for
still remarkable, though.
about
That's
4 or 5 years.
incredible.
4 or 5 years, and I don't have the guts to go, hey, how about book 2? But maybe. We need one more congressional inquiry, and maybe we
Right.
can get that book in there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, 50 Shades of Grays, Swamp Gas My Ass, Alien Shades of Grays. Those are his books, folks. The work is amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much.
During the
I
MUFON
appreciate it.
Symposium.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. While you are online checking out all of the amazing work of Ray Szymanski, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That's where you can find all the episodes. CuriousRealm.com/story is where you can go to share your story of extraterrestrial encounter, Bigfoot, cryptid encounters. Let us know your story. Give us your evidence. We have a Dropbox there where you can put in your photos, video. We will present it to our experts and see what answers we can get for you on your case. Stay tuned through these commercial breaks. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of Day 2 of MUFON Symposium here in Covington, Kentucky, right after this, folks. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Curious Realms continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023 here in Covington, Kentucky. Our guest in this segment is Yvonne Smith. She is a hypnotist and author of the book Chosen.
Hypnotherapist.
Hypnotherapist. Sorry, yes, not hypnotist. It is not a stage act.
No.
It is not a stage act. Let's get into the world of hypnotherapy real quick, because I don't know if a lot of people realize how deeply involved in this field, especially when it comes to experiencers, that it is. And the fact that MUFON actively has a whole realm of hypnotherapists that are licensed, that they work with, that are vetted in their field. So
Yes.
how is it that you came to the work of hypnotherapy to begin with, Yvonne?
I've been doing this 32 years now, and when I went to see Bud Hopkins, who is considered the pioneer of abduction research, I became very interested in it, and it just seemed from there I wanted to read more about it because I was fascinated. And now after 3 decades, I feel that I was directed to do this. I was just, everything in my path just pointed to doing this.
Did you start off in the world of hypnotherapy or with social work, psychology? How did
I
you
was
come to
going
hypnotherapy to
to,
begin with?
I was interested in hypnotherapy to work with cancer patients mainly,
Okay.
because I had a very close uncle who passed away from cancer at the age of 41.
Oh, wow.
So, so I took, I went to hypnotherapy college. and I thought, I'm gonna do this to help out the cancer patients, and then maybe work with a couple of abduction cases.
Sure.
And it just turned out to be the other way around. I mean, I've been specializing, like I said, over 3 decades, and I started out working with other with people who have had cancer, going through the chemotherapy, and a lot of the, when I first started, losing weight and stop smoking and things like that.
Yeah.
But as I met more and more people in the field, I began to receive referrals, people coming to me because they thought maybe something happened to them. And then it just seemed, that's what tells you, and it's still like that today, it's there is so much need for trained therapists.
Yeah.
And that's why now I'm going to be teaching my 3rd workshop for therapists who are interested in doing this.
Yeah. And hypnosis is a fantastic way to relieve trauma, to help people find trauma that they didn't even know existed. I know, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, I went through a session with Terry Lovelace.
Oh, I know Terry very well.
And I've never had a UFO UAP experience, and I guess I've had one, but not like, hey, look, there's a craft.
Sure.
Not an abduction experience. I've had a few paranormal experiences, but it was remarkable to just go into a state of hypnosis and find out that apparently I had another life as a field hand.
Oh, so you went back to another life, past life experience. That's a whole other...
It was pretty interesting, and it was pretty
sure
remarkable. I aired the entire thing live.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I recorded myself going through the experience and aired
Terry
the whole...
actually take you back purposely to another life, or did you just spontaneously go there?
We just went. He took me wherever I needed to go, and that is what came forth. It was pretty interesting.
Very.
And going back and looking at it, there wasn't any leading from him or anything like that, which is of course a lot of people's big concern whenever it comes to hypnotherapy, because it can be very easy to put suggestions into somebody's head. How do you, as a hypnotherapist, begin a session with somebody and start that process of really digging deep and cracking that nut?
Well, when they first contact me, now it's through email, mainly through my website. Sure. I will send them questionnaires, life history questionnaire, a second one to fill out, asking them specific, if they had a sighting and so forth. And there's things that I look for, where all the similarities, if they had experiences since childhood, or their families had experiences, their siblings, and if it looks like they have possibly could be an abductee experiencer, then I will do an initial consultation over Zoom, and then from there, when they're ready, they will book a first regression session. So it's a process they go through first. And I send out the information to make sure someone is ready. Because if something comes up that they're not ready for, like say some hidden memories about being taken, and they're not ready for it, it's too late. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
That's it. Yeah. And that can be very hard as a therapist to be there to help somebody, but at the same time have to carefully guide and find your way through that situation.
Right.
How often has it been the case that somebody's come to you, let's say, for other sessions, and through those sessions you've come to find out that they are an experiencer? Has that ever been the case?
There's only been just very few instances of that. If they thought, like I say, look for certain things, the history. And if they thought, was that a dream or did that really happen? And it turns out that they really didn't have anything, to point to an abduction. But because I vet them in the beginning and talk to them, answer their questions when they're filling out the questionnaire. I mean, there's plenty of time to go through everything. But so I say it's very, very few times when that's happened. And usually people who come to me for abduction, they've already been through years of traditional therapy for other issues, in their lives. So there's an area there that their therapist is not able to tap into. And in turn, I receive referrals from many therapists, many traditional therapists.
Yeah, and when you do receive a referral, how do you begin? You've got the questionnaire, everything else. How do you begin handling that person once the questionnaire is in, and begin actively crafting your session and the way that you pose questions to them?
You mean when you were actually in a session?
Yes. Yeah.
It just, I don't plan a session.
Okay.
I just take them back to, say, when they were 10 years old. And I let them decide.
Okay.
10 years old or something recent. And then once the process begins, I take them through the typical relaxation, and then we start going through the regression, so taking them back in time. And once they start talking, say something comes up, say they see a light or they see a strange craft or whatever it is, then I will start. I will start posing the questions as they're giving me the information.
Okay.
And you have to be, of course, very, very careful not to lead someone. Let them tell you what they're experiencing.
Okay. Give us an example of that, just so people are aware of non-leading questions.
Oh, if they say, I think I see, or there's a really bright light. I really can't tell what's there. And I really can't see because it's so bright. And I will tell them, we'll look around and see if you can see the source of the light. Where's the light? Where's it coming from? Just things like that. Let them tell me that, oh my gosh, I see a craft, but I know it's not an airplane or helicopter. Then I'll ask them to describe it. See, I don't describe it for them.
Sure.
Does it have lights? Does it have this? I let them describe it and tell me what they're experiencing.
And it sometimes that experience can, once again, be very visceral, even on the remembrance side. What have been some of the extreme cases that you've seen as far as reaction while under hypnosis?
I've had people, they cry, and that's mainly, that's very common. Because they'll relive the experience, they'll scream, they'll try to jump up off the couch.
Oh, wow.
But then, a trained therapist will pose the suggestions that, listen to my voice, you're safe, you're here, you're just letting yourself remember, So you don't let them go through that trauma again.
Yeah, because, that's the main thing, is that you're trying to help them release the trauma, not necessarily relive the trauma.
Right.
And, that's a very fine line to walk, even as a regular therapist,
Sure.
much less as a hypnotherapist. And amongst the many cases that you've done, what have been a couple of the standout cases that you've had?
The very first case that I had of two brothers, so it was a double abduction. I presented it in my talk this morning. I think that case put it on the map for me, that this is real. These people aren't making this up. They were abducted as little children, and then they finally decided later on in years, as adults, to undergo the process. And there were many, many similarities. When I work with witnesses, multiple witnesses, I will interview them separately, And of course, I regress them separately, and I tell them not to talk to each other until we're completely done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I wrote a book, The Coronado Incident, of a dozen people who were abducted on Coronado Island in San Diego. I was the MC of a UFO conference, and there was a dozen of my CERO members, my support group members, that were taken that weekend. So it took me a long time to write a book about that.
Wow. All 12 of them. That is remarkable. And have they all been through the hypnotic process? And
as I was writing the book, I was still doing sessions because there were so many of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And similar experience from all of them?
They saw each other on the craft.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It's the books are available on Amazon. In fact, I'm going to be putting out a second edition of Coronado pretty soon.
Okay.
So,
cool. Well, I will definitely have to keep a lookout for that one, because that sounds like a fascinating story. The fact of 12 people being abducted and being aware of each other's abduction. How frequently have you seen cases like that?
oh, it's often that you get multiple witness abductions. Maybe not as many as a dozen people, but like the Travis Walton case, who I know really well, he was 6 people.
Yeah.
And it's not unusual. People think it is, but it's not unusual.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is one of the things that we discuss on the show regularly, is that there are numerous sightings that happen where one person there sees it and the rest do not.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, I attribute that a lot to vibrational field, things like that. The idea of just kind of being in the zone.
They choose who is going to be able to see them. And they choose who's going to be able to photograph them, because not everybody can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, precisely. I mean, you'd have to have some pretty specialized equipment to be able to catch things in that vibratory range.
Right.
It's just a different realm of physics that we're playing with. And have you seen any experiencers that have come back physically changed? Anything like that?
They're changed, yeah. They often they feel more spiritual because they've been touched by something that we didn't all grow up talking about this. We didn't learn like this in school. It was just something touched them, seeing and interacting with beings from wherever they're from. So they definitely come back changed.
Yeah.
You can't help it.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, and not just mentally and spiritually changed, sometimes physically changed even. Scars being healed, all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah, they do healings.
It is remarkable.
They don't do healings on everybody, and who knows why they choose the people that they do healings on, but they actually do. But they do need us healthy and strong, and because they need our material. They need our DNA and blood and whatever else they need.
Yeah. And in all of your investigations, how many people have experienced and, I guess, not been able to tell their families? How many people have experienced with them families that you've seen where...
that's very common, very widespread. They're not able to talk to family members, or the family members, sometimes if they've experienced something together, the one family member doesn't want to talk about it, so it makes it too real.
Yeah.
And that's why I established my support group 31 years ago, because people were leaving my office and I was the only one they were talking to.
Well, and let's get into your support group a little bit, because I love the fact that there are so many contactee support groups that have started up, not just the Experiencer Resource Team with MUFON, but groups like yours. Whenever I have folks like Michael J.S. Carter on, things like that, who had their experience decades ago, 60s, 70s, it's not like maybe you would find a pull tab at your local library for a support group or at a community center where it's like, hey, have you seen this? Like, come meet us on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
It's not like it's
No.
the day of the internet where it's hop on, let me find some help. Let me find a group of like-minded individuals.
I mean, they might be able to now.
Yeah.
But when I started,
there
we
was
didn't
almost
have
nothing.
the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
We were just starting to email. And so everything was done by phone calls. And everything was done by, and it's still done in my practice by referrals mainly. And then, of course, people find me, on Facebook or whatever, but that's not what it was 32 years ago.
Yeah.
So, so I just found it to be very necessary to start the group. And we had about 6 people, but I had no idea that it was going to be 31 years later, no idea.
And how many people in your group now?
Well, not everybody attends every meeting, so we've had, a few hundred people go in and out. And the old ones that started with me, you don't see them for a while for whatever reason, and they come back. And we have lately, the last month or two, I mean, I've been so busy being contacted by new people that, again, there's a need for a support group and for therapy, just to get them through what, and make sense of what happened to them. So, in a way, I'm kind of glad the internet's there. The internet has, of course, made it more difficult because they can Photoshop, people can Photoshop things and all of that. So it's complicated matters as well, but at least for people being able to find a support group or a therapist, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, and much less stigmata than walking up to a doctor's door trying to get a referral or telling them your case and will you take my case, doctor?
Exactly.
Because there would be many doctors out there, many psychiatrists who would say, I would rather not take your money. I believe that your situation is not one that actually happened. And I'm not going to take your money doing that.
That's why a lot of people are afraid to talk to their, and even though they've been through their therapist or psychiatrist, whatever it is, they're kind of, they try to tiptoe into it, but they're afraid they're going to be put into a mental institution.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of testing that goes on so they could prove that these people aren't psychotic or have any kind of psychosis. But it's just that, it's just a very difficult thing for someone to try to bring up to their doctor or therapist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a sensitive thing to begin with. Sadly, the one thing I akin it to whenever I talk to people like Sev Talk, stuff like that, is that people who have been sexually assaulted. There becomes a trauma there. There becomes a guilt there that you attach to yourself for some reason, and it can really do a lot of things in your life.
Of course.
There are numerous people who sans therapy, move forward with their life, things like that, but a lot of people are not able to, and they keep that inside, and it affects so many different sides of their health, life, relationships.
Exactly. It's difficult. It does affect marriages, relationships. Very, very difficult. I've seen it over the years.
Yeah, and I'm honestly looking forward to the day that there is something about experiencers in the AMA journals, in the psychiatric
absolutely.
journals,
Hopefully,
on how to treat, how to deal with it when it comes forward. I mean, no different than when allegations of child abuse, things like that, used to be overlooked by psychiatrists.
Exactly.
And then they found out, no, this is apparently an endemic problem and we need to do something about it. And I think we're finally getting to that point in a society with this topic.
We've made strides, but abduction is still a whole other issue. I mean, we've made strides with pilots coming forward, reporting what they saw.
Yeah.
But there's still, nobody's talking yet at a congressional hearing about abductions. But we've got to start somewhere.
We do.
So
We do. It opens the conversation and really puts the conversation outside of the box, which is what's necessary, is to not have walls on it.
Exactly.
Right now. The more walls we put on, I've said it numerous times since the whistleblower hearing, the idea of NHI, non-human intelligence, removes it from the box and the construct of alien.
Exactly.
Now, how frequent have you ever had a case where the encounters that somebody had were maybe not alien, where it was where they believed maybe it was time shift from the future or something like that, where it wasn't alien entity or craft?
No, I don't think the top of my head. Paranormal comes out, but paranormal and UFO experiences are intertwined.
They have become more and more intertwined, it seems. I belong to a lot of communities. I interview a lot of researchers. I attend a lot of conferences like this in different fields, from paranormal to remote viewing, cryptids.
Right.
And the worlds are melding. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah.
It is.
But I haven't come across, I don't think I've had hundreds of cases of what you had asked.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Anyway, do we...
I was just about to say, one last question before we let you go. What can people do to start their journey of healing, Yvonne? What can they do to begin getting over these traumas?
It's to reach out, reach out to a qualified therapist. They can go to my website. There's the questionnaires, the information's on there.
Yeah.
And... or go to the MUFON website. They could try to refer somebody. I'll try to refer somebody if they want somebody near their home. I do, since COVID, I've been doing Zoom sessions because even though everybody was on quarantine, the experiences were still there.
Yeah.
So I do in-person sessions as well as Zoom sessions.
Awesome. Well, look right there at the camera. Let everybody know where they can go to find you. Let them know where they can go to keep up with your research. Right up there.
Okay. You could just go to my website, hypnotherapist.yvonnesmith.com. Send me an email. You can fill out the questionnaires and send them to me, and I'll contact you. And we go from there.
Awesome. Well,
So,
fantastic,
thank you.
Yvonne. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you
I
very
greatly
much for having
appreciate it.
me.
You bet. I'd love to have you on again and again because this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, as many experiencers as I know.
Yes.
It is remarkable the work that you guys do. So
Thank
keep
you
doing
for having
it.
me.
Keep doing it.
Thank you.
While you are online checking out all of the amazing work from Yvonne Smith, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can find all the episodes, all the interviews. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can also find our experiencer forum, CuriousRealm.com/story. Share your experience with the paranormal, cryptids, UFOs. If you're a government whistleblower, share your story with us. Share your evidence with us. We will present it to our guests and our experts and see if we can find answers for you. Stay tuned after these commercial breaks. We will be coming back with our final bit of Day 2 coverage here at MUFON Symposium 2023 in Covington, Kentucky, right after this. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our waning coverage of Day 2 of MUFON Symposium here in Covington, Kentucky. We have with us right now Terry lygne-kehl. She is a member of MUFON. She is a MUFON representative. What do you let the audience know exactly what you do with MUFON?
Okay. Well, let's see. I'm on the board of directors, and I am a former state director of Florida MUFON. I'm now living in Paris, Tennessee, and I'm the director of memberships, and I am also working with MUFON University as their consultant.
Awesome.
And so, I got my hands in a couple different fires.
a few fingers with pies going on. And, the reason I wanted to have you on is because of your heavy involvement with MUFON. I love all of the work that MUFON does, but you are also, you have a long lineage of contact within your family as well, which was a topic that we were talking about earlier, the idea that it seems that experiences tend to run in familial lines. It's really, really interesting.
And it is a very interesting subject. I don't pretend to be an expert on it because there are so many variables involved.
Yeah.
However, yes, there's been 70 years, and it started with my oldest brother, and he's much older than I am. He was from my mother's first marriage. So when he was 9 years old, and he's passed away, at 76, and that was a few years back. He had someone show up and literally speak to him, and he didn't even know who this person was, and say, at 9 o'clock tonight, and at this park, there is going to be a ship. Well, okay, and that was back in the 40s. Okay, and
wow.
And he, my first thought while he was sharing this with me was, oh my gosh, he's going to be abducted by a pedophile or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to your mind in 2023. Or well, he told me this in 2020, and I thought, oh yeah. Well, he went to the park, and sure enough, this ship showed up, and he had this moment. And he doesn't know if he had missing time. He doesn't know what happened. But he said it was absolutely just like the man said. And I'm like, what man? Phil, why would you listen to that?
Interesting,
And he said, I don't even know why I listened. He said somebody had seen a craft in our neighborhood while we kids were all playing. And the guy that was there said the craft will be at the park. As crazy as that sounds, that's what happened. So that was my brother Phil's experience. And then my mother, who owned a houseboat, used to like to rent her house out to this friend of hers that was a Canadian for 3 months out of every year. And she would get on her houseboat, she'd tool around in the Gulf of Mexico, and her husband would throw over anchor, and they would, hang out all these different little porticals all over, up and down the west coast of Florida. And even go into the dry Tortugas and stuff like that. They were both divers.
Okay.
And she said what shocked her was when they first started doing this, they were seeing these USOs shoot right up out of the water, not even making barely a ripple. She said they came up clean, and all of a sudden there it would be, and it would hover. She said they were green cylinders, and she said it was like nothing she could have ever even imagined. And then it would just hover and then just go, and she said it was gone so fast. They would both look at each other like, did we see that? What did we just see?
Yeah.
And for the longest time, they really didn't even know what they were looking at, because my mother wasn't into UFOs of any type.
Well, and especially, the traditional shape of a UFO is not a cylinder.
Right.
There are numerous sightings of them, but
green. And hovering over the water, coming out of the water. Okay, so this was all new to her back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Okay, and she did this through the 60s and the 70s. Now, I had my first experience with extraterrestrials in 1979, so I was in the 70s. My brother was in the 40s, my mom in the 60s, me in the 70s. And, I'm coming home from work one night and then hovered over a railroad track just outside of our area where my home was. I see this UFO, and it's just hovered there, and I'm thinking to myself, no way. Now here's what's interesting too. At this point, I didn't know about my brother's exposure. I did not know about my mother's exposure.
Okay.
That night, I had my experience. There were two crafts, one that was over the railroad tracks, but unbeknownst to me, there was also one landed to the right of me. And the one that had landed was the one that this big, huge blue light came out of. It was the most powerful light blue I'd ever seen. And back in 1979, we didn't have fiber optics or anything like that. So, here's this extraterrestrial standing in this light. And he was a tall white. Never heard of him, didn't know anything about him, didn't believe in him. I really believed all my life that extraterrestrial stuff and all that was comic book entertainment.
Sure.
So for me to actually see it, and being a Christian, I was like, you got to be kidding me, you know. So I lived through the moment. I was taken aboard that one ship by that tall white. I saw 2 small grays who were assisting him on me, had missing time. After it was all over, I'm giving you the quick Reader's Digest of a very long experience. And after it was all over and they had taken off, I stood there, not the same girl that went into the craft, but now I was begging them to stay or take me. And I'm like, now how do you go from being an unbeliever to being an instantaneous believer and devotee? And I'm like, why am I begging? I was literally standing there crying.
Wow.
And I thought, now this is really cool.
Were you afraid when your experience started?
I was very afraid.
Okay.
But the craft comforted me. And it was so beautiful, so powerful. And the blue light that was going across the one that was hovered over the railroad tracks, there was something in that blue light that was just so relaxing, or it was speaking to me somehow. Of course, at the time, I didn't realize that. I can look back now and understand it, but at the time, I became so curious. And so, here I am looking at it, and the fear did leave me, but when I saw the tall white, I was absolutely stunned. I mean, I didn't even know how to wrap my head around that. And fear was just a small part of that equation, But anyhow, when they left, here I am crying and begging. And then the cool part was I'm listening to David Paulides yesterday, okay, because he was one of our speakers here, our keynote speaker. I was blown away when he said that someone hadn't been taken simply because they had a vasectomy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? What kind of craziness is that? Okay. You know why they didn't take me when I'm standing there crying and begging them to take me? I'd had a hysterectomy.
Wow.
It hit me while I was listening to David.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's why they didn't take me.
Unviable donor.
Yes.
Interesting.
And I'm thinking, oh my God. And the whole time I remember saying right out loud, I said, aren't I good enough? Why aren't you taking me? And I was begging them to take me, and they didn't take me. So now I know why.
Yeah.
Right here today, 2023, I finally figured it out thanks to David Paulides.
Well, and it's interesting the fact that you've been in this field for a long time.
Yeah.
Lynn.
Yeah.
Or Terry, and to know that you just now stumbled upon that realization.
Yeah.
And that goes to show, though, that don't stop exploring your experience.
Right.
Never stop exploring your experience and what it means, why it happened, why you weren't chosen. Things like that.
Exactly. And now I know I was chosen to have the experience.
Yeah.
And while I was on that craft, let me go back to the experience itself. While I was on that craft to the right that had landed with the tall white and the 2 grays, he looked down and spoke to me, the tall white, and through mental telepathy said, in a male voice, which is interesting, male voice, we will not harm you. We will not take you. And I thought, take me? Take me where? So he was telling me, right then and there, we're not taking you.
Yeah.
So what do? I'm begging and crying and pleading with him to take me. And I'm like, my head and my heart were like, what are you saying? Shut up. Why are you begging them to take you? This is absurd. And now I know why they didn't.
Yeah.
And yet he had told me that right straight away. So I must have passed out on that table that they put me on in this all white room. The walls were white, the floors were white, a very soft white glow. The ceiling was white, everything was white, every bit of it wasn't furniture, it was a table. And it was glowing. It had a glow to it. And It's just all, to me, hard to wrap my head around, even still to this day. It changed everything about who I was and how I felt and what I knew and what I believed. And now here I am at this age, just finding out. It's still unveiling. I'm still getting it. It's crazy.
We were talking earlier about the concept of ontological shock and how that sets in and how I talk to a lot of experiencers, Terry, and beyond the world of UFO, UAP.
Right.
Paranormal, cryptids, things like that.
Right, I've been there.
I don't know of a single one where it started out good.
Yeah, it's always so bizarre.
People come to terms with their experience. But I know very few experiencers where they were not either frozen in fear, frozen in indecision, frozen in disbelief.
Yes.
And where afterward it did not shake their foundation in some way, shape, or form.
No, it actually increased my faith, and it increased my understanding. It increased my knowledge base of what was going on. Although I didn't get it fully, I'm no expert on these subjects, but I didn't get it fully. I don't know why things happened the way they did. But this I do know. We are spiritual beings on a human journey. And this human journey here on this planet has many open doors. It really, really does. Yeah. And depending on your life and your experiences, which door will open and how it will open. And because I've been an experiencer since I was 5 years old, not necessarily with extraterrestrials, but with the paranormal realm. And I've gone through a demonic time where I saw, full-bodied apparitions, okay? That is not normal stuff.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to live through that because it's so frightening and so mind-boggling.
One of the experiences I talk about regularly on the show was one of them that led me to a crisis of faith.
Yes.
I was a former seminarian, all kinds of things, taught theology studies, all kinds of stuff to youth, adults.
Yeah.
But the day, again, I saw a shadow person.
I
it was
have
weird.
seen that.
It was freaky.
Yeah.
But the day one grabbed me in my bed, Terry.
Okay, that would make a difference.
That was when my crisis came.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey, I had like full on religious experience. That is what led me into the seminary.
Yeah.
And thank God that the man who wore the collar that I went to after Mass and was like, Father, I just had this really weird thing happen in the middle of Mass. And I told him, like, I was not there.
Yeah.
I was somewhere else.
Right. They have ways of transporting us.
And fortunately, I had a very open-minded, open-hearted priest who was like, Chris, you should probably explore that. If you feel you were called by God, you should explore that. You should look into that. And if you need some help, you let me know.
What'd you do?
I explored entering the seminary, and I actively entered the seminary and studied to be a priest for a year and all kinds of things. It led me down a different road.
Yeah.
But that experience with the shadow person was a stealing of my faith in a totally different way. And I think it was because of the latent fear that was there, where it's not that I hadn't been told about, there's evil things stalking your soul around every corner.
Very true.
It's a different thing when something grabs you.
That's right.
And you can't move, you can't respond, you can't speak. That was a very, very, still to this day, visceral experience for me. And I've had numerous experiences of sleep paralysis.
Right.
It's the only one where something popped out of the wall and it grabbed me. And it changed me. It changed the paradigm in which I live, how I view the world, and how I interact.
Did it rob
with
your
experiencers?
faith?
No.
Good.
It made my faith stronger.
Good.
And that was even after telling the priest, like, hey, man, I've got a sincere crisis of conscience here. Like, you are asking me to accept upon faith spectral evidence.
Right.
And when presented evidence of the spectral, you have no faith.
You have questions.
and that is a big logical barrier for me to leap.
Absolutely. And
Not faith-wise, but
Yeah.
logically, I cannot reconcile that.
Right. Right.
And yeah, I still talk to my God. I still experience spirituality on a daily basis. I don't really go to a church a whole lot. I'll say that, but not open to the experience. I'm just called in a different way now.
Exactly. I don't think that there is a certain way that we all are called. Every one of us is different. Everything about our lives are unique
Yeah.
to us. And we don't share that uniqueness with each other. Are we all created the same?
In a base way, sure.
In a base way.
Yeah, we've
Very
all got
good.
the same $13 of chemicals inside
Right.
of us.
That's right. But mentally, spiritually, and physically, we are not all alike.
Absolutely not.
And I used to hear people say we were all created identical, and I thought, well, I wasn't.
yeah.
So what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
But it was just me questioning that theology and what they were teaching, and I knew beyond any shadow of any doubt, I am definitely not like that person. And it's all our mental and spiritual life. You know, I might look like you with two eyes, a nose, and a mouth, but we all function very differently and at different levels.
Yep.
Yeah,
we all process reality through different filters.
Completely different.
And that is all experiential. I say it on the show regularly that is why two people in the same place, one person can witness and one person doesn't.
Right, exactly.
In the exact same situation.
In the exact same.
Why two people brought up in the same house. You talk to my brother.
Totally different.
We were both brought up by the same single mother who worked 2 jobs and went to college.
Yeah. And you're nothing
we have
alike.
totally different experiences within that home.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
that's just it. Now, with your experience,
Uh-huh.
with your numerous experiences with ETs at this point, what was it like for you to find out from your mother and your brother that they'd had experiences that they had never told you about?
Right. Getting back to that, my mother, that night after I had seen in 1979 the craft and the extraterrestrials, and they had left, I stood in the middle of the road outside of my little Honda Civic with my head in my hands going, oh my God, I need to speak to somebody who loves me and somebody who knows me and knows I'm not nuts. Okay. Yeah. And I thought, who? Well, who else?
Mom.
My mom.
Mom.
So I thought it was like 2:30 at night because that's when this all started. And I didn't know about missing time, so I didn't know that I had missing time. So I get to her house, I knock on the door. Her husband comes and says, Terry, what are you doing here so early in the morning? I'm like, morning? You're sound asleep. It's 2:30 at night. He goes, Terry, it's 4 a.m. And I went, what?
Wow.
And I went, oh, he's so tired. He doesn't even know what time it is,
Poor old man.
And I thought it was him.
Wow.
I actually thought he was nuts. And nothing clued me in that it was 4 a.m. because, it's always your darkest hours before the light,
Yeah.
And so it was pretty dark out. And my mom heard me at the door and she goes, come on in, what's going on? And I go, Mom, pour the coffee. I got to tell you what happened to me. So she listens to the whole thing and she's sitting about as close to me as you are right now. And after I tell her my whole experience, she puts her hand on my knee and she's kind of doing this. And she says, it's okay, Tare. I've seen them too. I jumped off the couch, looked at her in the eyes. I was 27 years old, and I said to her these words, I am 27 years old, and you didn't prepare me for this? How could you do that to me? How could you not let me know? And she just was like shocked, like, what are you so upset about? And I'm like, are you kidding what I just went through? I just blew my mind. Yeah. I'm trying to deal with this, Mom. Why didn't you prepare me? And that's when she said, well, Tare, when I rent the house out, to her girlfriend up in Canada, and we go out on the houseboat, this is what happened. And she shared it with me. And I was trying to be kind and understanding, but I was so angry because I thought, geez, if I'd have had a clue that this stuff is even real, I might have been able to wrap my mind around. I said, I just made a fool of myself, begging and screaming and crying for them to take me. And they didn't take me, and I don't know why they didn't take me. And she was like, whatever you do, don't share this with anybody. She was in management at Honeywell Aerospace. I had been working at Honeywell as a secretary along with my sister Chris. And my mom said, Terry, if anybody finds out what you're talking about here, they're going to label you an absolute kook case. And I'm like, okay, I'll never say anything. And I didn't until 29 years later. And I had like somewhat of a screen memory of it, but it almost disappeared in my thoughts. I never thought about it again. 29 years later, I'm sitting at home and boom, I hear an audible voice say, go to the computer, report your sighting. Like it just happened 29 years earlier. And just like that, I knew exactly what it was talking about. So I got up, I went to the computer, and, well, I don't even know how to do that. Report a UFO. Up comes MUFON, and the rest is history.
Wow. Wow. And what an incredible story of coming to work with MUFON. And not just that, but coming to the awareness of MUFON.
Right. I didn't know there was anything like this. And I want to say this. I am so grateful for MUFON, because where would you go to say, this happened to me?
Yeah.
And you can go to a lot of places, but nobody does what MUFON does.
That's right.
We are the boots on the ground. We investigate what happened. We are here to reassure you, to walk you through that experience, help you know what happened to you.
Yeah.
And you're not crazy.
Well,
this has happened to millions of others.
Exactly. And it's also the fact of, you've got the team in place to help respond as well to the victim side of it.
That's right.
Which is, I think, what has been ignored for a long, long time.
Yes.
There's been a few agencies, NICAP, things like that are still around, but MUFON, I think, has had the most cohesive intake
Absolutely.
of information
They're devoted.
since the day that they said, this is our process.
Right.
It has been the process.
Right.
There have been a couple things, tool-wise, technology-wise, that have been added to said process.
Right.
But it starts the same way all the time, every time. Starts with a witness report.
Right.
Goes
On
from
our
a witness.
CMS.
Goes from a witness report to, let's get an investigator there.
Yes.
Let's find physical evidence. Let's
Right.
look at pictures, things like that. It's remarkable. It's great. It's
It
great.
is. It really is. And we have a passion here for helping.
Yep.
It really is what we're all about. We are the oldest and largest UFO reporting agency in the world. There are others, but they don't do anything.
And fully
They just
volunteer.
take your information and hang on to it.
Yeah.
We're using this for stats. We're learning so much about what's out there, what has happened to you, how it's happened to you. There are so many connections that we make with that person who reports. And most of the people who report want to be a part of us. So, they join and become members, and that's a wonderful thing. And, I love it because I'm meeting people like you.
Same.
I mean, I'm meeting people like all these other people that are here, speakers. I'm a speaker this year talking about my alien healing from 2012. And I'll be doing that tomorrow. So if anybody's out there listening to us and you want to hear all about that, come on down.
Yeah. Well, let's get into your alien healing real quick, because that is something that we've talked about regularly on the show. It's something that we've talked about with Kathleen Martin whenever we've had her on. The idea that when people come back, they seem to be physiologically changed.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're talking close encounter.
Yeah.
When you're talking abduction, when you're talking being present with the craft.
Right.
And
those are close encounters.
Yeah.
And they're life-changing.
Yeah.
Every facet of what you experience takes you deeper into the understanding, the knowledge, and sometimes the fears, but also the victory of it all. And you get comfortable with it after a while. If somebody showed up right now, with me, like tonight, or if I was alone, or even if I was a group of people, I'd be okay with that, because I understand things now that I never could have back in 1979. I have wrapped my mind around the entire concept of extraterrestrials are real.
Yeah.
They're created, but not in our image. We're created in the image of God.
Sure.
They're not. But
Yeah.
neither are horses or cats
Or angels.
or angels. Well, angels are pretty much in their image, even the fallen angels.
Sure.
But they can morph, they can change.
Yeah.
God's angels don't morph or change. They are who they are, but they can if he wanted them to. They can be there and then not there.
Sure.
I've seen that with
Yeah.
my own two eyes. My experiences have opened a myriad of other doors. And at my age now, I'm happy to walk through those doors because we are spiritual beings on a human journey. And this humanity that we have, that we possess, I want to know everything about it. And I want to know how to pack my bags to go to the next level as well.
Yeah.
So I want to know what happens here. What do I need to understand here? What do I need to know? I need to reach out and understand all these different facets of what's happening on this realm.
Yep.
Because once we leave this realm, I know a lot of people believe in reincarnation, and I don't know if that's ever happened to me before. I just don't know about reincarnation. Maybe I've been here. People call me an old soul. I'm like, well, maybe. I don't know.
Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only change form.
It can change form. And do I choose to come here? Like I was talking with, Ray Szymanski this afternoon.
Yeah.
And he says we choose to come here.
Sure.
This is our choice. And
Yeah.
I do have some strange screen memories about that, about being on a ship and sinking and dying and watching the people that were dead as I was also dying.
Wow.
And I watched underwater animals eating them, they became a food source once dead.
Sure.
And I saw that before I died. And I'm like, now, how could a little girl of 3 years old remember something like that? And I'm like, well, maybe there is reincarnation. Maybe the Lord does allow us to revisit this. Perhaps maybe if we were wicked or somehow evil, or we have to come back. And but I don't see it in the scriptures, so I don't understand it. So I can't talk with any knowledge about that
Absolutely.
because I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. I listen to others and I consider
Absolutely.
what they share.
Yeah.
And I'm interested.
Yep.
But I'm no expert. So
It's hard to be an expert about just about anything spiritual
anymore. It is.
It's hard because once again that is a personal journey for each
It is.
individual person. There are
Every
some
person.
capital T universal truths. But aside from that, it's all so individual, much like the UFO UAP experience. It is such an individual experience for
It is.
each person. There are similarities among stories. There are common themes.
Yeah, but the stories are all so individual with
Yeah.
each person. And one person might experience 10 things while another just only one thing.
Yep.
And, I remember when I used to hear other people's stories, I'd go, that is so bizarre. And then one day I'm sitting at home going, so is my experience.
Yeah.
My experience is so stinking bizarre. I have a hard time relating to it. And then I thought, who am I to judge somebody else's experience when I haven't walked in their shoes? I don't know what they experienced. I don't know what happened to them.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, you've had an experience with a shadow person that grabbed you. I've seen shadow people.
Yep.
They're blacker than black.
The first, one of my first actual memories, Terry. I was about 3-4 years old.
Yeah.
We lived in a trailer
Interesting.
house over in East Houston, and we had a swing set between our property and the neighbor's property, who I'd go help gather chicken eggs, things like that. And I remember looking out the back window one day and seeing a dark figure next to the swing set who was beckoning to me.
Oh, wow. Did you tell your parents?
I don't know that I've ever told my mother or anything like that. I've told my brother about it. I've expressed the story numerous times on the show, but that is one of my most visceral memories from when I was a child.
Isn't that odd?
And, it's interesting to me that later one of my most visceral memories is also a dark shadow.
Yes.
You
So
know.
it was still with you, still beckoning you.
Could very well be.
Got tired of waiting
Could
and just
very well be.
grabbed ya.
Who knows?
Yeah.
And but it's one of those, because of those experiences, I will forever believe the experiencer until proven otherwise.
Right. And that's where I finally came to, understand. Just listen.
Yeah.
Don't judge.
Yeah.
Don't try to figure their thing out. It's their thing to figure out, not yours. That's their walk, their life. Although many of us, like I identify with you because I've seen what you've seen. And I have an opinion on then what
Sure.
that was. And I do believe it was something from a darker realm reaching out to you.
Could very well be.
And it may have very well been to pull you off course.
Yeah.
And maybe it did for a season, but then you were able to find yourself back to where you needed to be. You were smarter because of the experience, and you were able then now to know, if I see something like that again, I'll have a different attitude towards it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm okay now with so many things. If I saw a demon, I'd rebuke it and bind it.
Sure.
If I saw a full-bodied apparition of something, I'd rebuke it and bind it. Other people say, well, they like to play with those entities and all that and ask them questions. Not me.
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
and-
I want to go to the next level. I don't want to be in that lower realm where those things exist. And if they're coming at me, there's a reason.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to learn something.
And that is, I am not denying the work of Dr. Stephen Greer and CE5.
No. I've had CE5 experiences.
I know many people who have. I have
Yes.
yet to go to a group meeting or
They're
go to a
real.
gathering and see it in person. I
Yes.
would be very interested in that.
Well, we should do that sometime.
Absolutely. Well, one of the topics that we talk about regularly on the show, Terry, is the idea that is our reticent belief. Kind of like the idea of the original work of Hal Puthoff in the world of remote viewing. And when the scientist goes home and he's thinking about his experiment, he is affecting the experiment
Yeah.
in the lab. Things are changing because of his thinking about it.
I know.
And I guess part of my curiosity is, are we helping manifest some of these things? Are we?
Possible.
But when a group of people is preparing their equipment, because hey, when I'm packing my gear and stuff, I am thinking about my show. I'm thinking about my setup. I'm thinking about if I forgot anything.
Right.
Last time, this time, what am I
Right.
going to do different? All that stuff. So, in your preparation, are you actively charging the space that you're going to investigate?
I believe you are.
And
I believe it all plays into
I
it.
think CE5 is more and more showing that really is the case. That is the case. And I'm one that I hold hope of hopes that
Oh, it's
all are
very
friend.
real.
That
Yeah.
all are friend.
Yeah.
None are foe.
Right.
But man, even the conversation of
But then you would create that as well. See, there you go. Because I would never receive anything negative. And they know that about me.
Yeah.
It's more than consciousness. Okay?
Well, it's intent.
It's intent. There you
it's
go.
intent. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's so much more than that. And that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to relay today in the Screen Memories panel that I was on. I don't use psychedelics to create the moment,
Sure.
like some people do.
Sure.
And I don't use, because those things can fog your
Absolutely.
understanding.
Absolutely.
I want to look at it with a clear, clean, wholesome mind. I want to understand it. I want to
Yeah.
grow. And we create these intents. And when in my CE5 experiences, there would have been maybe 11 of us there. 5 of us saw.
The others
rest did not.
Exactly.
And I'm like,
exactly
now,
what I
how
talk
could
about
that
on the show all the time.
be? And so I'm thinking to myself, how can that be? And the other ones that saw with me saw exactly what I saw. We were all...
Were they previous experiencers?
Yes. They were all previous experiencers.
Everybody in the group was previous
Everybody in the
experiencers?
group came because they were.
Okay.
There were. I think there were. I take that back. 2 that were not, and they did not see.
Interesting, because that's
Yes.
one of the concepts that I hold is the fact
Right.
that, especially those who have been in close contact,
Yes. Yeah.
Terry, we're talking a different world of physics and a different world of technology.
Right.
The way I akin it is, if I hold the natural Earth magnet within an inch or two of my watch for a little while,
Yeah. Something's going
it
to happen.
will not work.
That's right.
They will permanently be magnetized now.
Right.
Until I demagnetize it. I can use an opposite field and
Yes.
flip that magnet over and reverse that.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have to touch the magnet to the metal to make it magnetic.
No.
It only has to be in the presence
close.
of the field to be permanently changed
Yeah.
to magnetic.
Yes.
And I firmly believe that those who have had that extreme experience, that close encounter, that being in the craft, next to the craft, touching the craft, they are vibrationally changed. The same way that watch is, same way those gears
That's
become
right.
magnetic.
That's right.
We're talking about a whole new realm of physics here,
Yes,
man.
you are. And you're also talking about the fact that you've made a decision and a knowing, and now it's easy. It's having a deeper faith. You're having a faith in the fact that you know you've already walked through that.
Yeah.
It's possible. It's like people like Uri Geller who bend those spoons. Once you
I have
learn-
seen it happen.
Yeah.
I have seen it happen in front of my face.
Now, I've held a million forks and tried to bend them. I haven't gotten there yet, but once I have, never again would I doubt it. Never again would I have
Yeah.
an issue with it.
Yeah.
So it's very much like that. And in the CE5 encounter we had that night, we were all looking south. Everybody, we had all these chairs, we had fans out because we didn't want to have mosquitoes eating us to death, so we had the fans blowing on us to keep the mosquitoes off us. So we're all heading in that direction, looking over that way. All of a sudden, I'm standing there, and I heard this voice say to me, "Turn around." And I turned around, and when I did, I looked up, and here comes this craft. And first I thought it was an airplane, okay?
Sure.
So I'm looking at it, and then I'm like, oh, that's a little too fast. And then, vroom, it dropped all the way down. Vroom, went all the way up. I'm like, that's not a plane. It made an N, vroom, all the way back down. And I'm like, guys, turn around. You know, and this happened very quickly. And everybody turned around, but 5 of us saw
Wow.
very clearly, vroom, 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 which would have killed a human being.
Yeah.
Could not have been one of ours.
Yeah.
No way. We don't have that technology. And if we do, man, I'm totally not aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that G5, though, would have killed a human. Okay. So there wasn't any of us, no humans were on board that. And so then it started going here. Orion's belt in the night sky was right there, and it went right in and gone.
Wow.
And we're all going, can you see it? Can you see it? No, I think it disappeared. I don't see it. I don't see it. Well, keep looking. Is it over there? You know, and it went right in. And I said, that went right into Orion's belt. Now, I can't even tell you how many times people have told me that on CE5s, that when Orion's belt is visible like that, it just goes right into that belt.
Huh.
And I'm like, well, I never knew that. But
Interesting.
now I know it because I just watched it.
That is one of my favorite places to photograph in the night sky. So I will have to keep my eyes peeled. Terry, thank you so much for coming and taking the
Yes.
time to sit down. Your experiences are amazing. We've had a great time chatting over the last couple days. It's been great.
It is. It's fun.
Let everybody know how they can get involved, because once again, MUFON is a volunteer organization.
It
I
is.
cannot express that or emphasize that enough. As opposed to so many others that do this research, this is a fully volunteer thing.
It is.
Ain't nobody getting paid. And the funny thing is, when nobody's getting paid, pretty funny, they don't really follow paradigms from people that give them money. You know, it's kind of like the evening news where it's like, well, you know, I don't know if secret deodorant really jives with that story, so maybe we leave it out this segment.
Yeah, we're all
know?
driven by our passions and our understandings, current understandings, which are always changing. But thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed talking to you and meeting you and getting to know you and your beautiful wife.
Thank you.
This is
thank
awesome.
You. Absolutely. Let everybody here on the camera know where they can go to join MUFON, where they can go to become a field investigator, go for MUFON University when it launches. My God, I can't wait for that to launch.
I'm really looking forward to it.
How they can get involved with everything MUFON.
It's all in one place, MUFON.com. And right there will be our landing page, our main page, and there's drop-down boxes, join. And, you know, you have to go to MUFON University, you have to be a member. And then you also have to join to be a field investigator. And then we certify you, and you are certified. You do have a certification for going out, and we train you. We never let you go out on your own. We train you. You are then a part of MUFON University and move forward from there. And you can climb that ladder as high as you want to go. Yeah. And be, you know, a state director or maybe a chief investigator or a state section director. So, yeah, we'd love for you to join us. And if you want to reach out to me, if you've got any questions, I'm at DOM@MUFON.com. That's Director of Memberships, DOM@MUFON.com.
All right. Fantastic.
Thank
Carrie,
you so much.
Absolutely.
This has been so
absolutely.
wonderful.
I love all my MUFON involvement. It's so fantastic.
Thank you.
While you were online checking out everything from MUFON.com, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can find all of the episodes. That is where you can find all of the books from our guests. That's where you can find our experiencer form. If you're an experiencer of the paranormal, UFOs, cryptids, let us know. Give us your evidence. We will present it to our guests and experts and try to get you some answers. Stay with us through this next commercial break. We will have our last bit of coverage from MUFON. We'll be talking with Map in Black. Some really cool stuff when we come back from commercial break, folks. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our final segment of Day 2 coverage from MUFON Symposium 2023 here in Covington, Kentucky. Our guest is Jeff Craig. He is from Map in Black, and he's a cartographer. Number one, cartography is epic. The fact that there are still people out there practicing cartography is awesome. But your cartography work is absolutely amazing. Here is a map of the state of Kentucky, folks, and you can see there are numerous cryptids, all kinds of haunted locations, various enigma spots, things like that. And that is what this entire map of the whole United States is. I actively just took a picture of this map to send to David Paulides, because I don't know if you caught his presentation last night.
I did not, but I saw him earlier today, and I had to gift him a map.
Epic. That's awesome.
He is so awesome.
Well, and hopefully the one thing he notices is that right here in the United States, as you go down, like he showed last night, his stuff, maps. But this has the exact same lack that his map had.
Mm-hmm.
Where in this exact trough, he was like, there's nothing going on there, no anomalies, nothing like that. And you have almost the exact same data showing all kinds of sightings, haunted places, other mysterious locations, earthen mounds, everything. Like if you are into the paranormal, folks, I'm here to tell you, if you're a cryptid hunter or anything like that, you need one of these maps. It is absolutely awesome. How did you get into cartography to begin with?
In general, I got into cartography because I've always loved maps. And in college, I was an education major, and my roommate even called me Mr. Maps because I just put maps on the wall. There was something about the visual aspect of a map growing up in the 70s and 80s, we were on road trips with the family, and I had the Rand McNally Road Atlas.
Yeah.
Following along. So paper maps always just maybe the physical touch of the map and following along and looking at the maps and wondering what else is out there. I think that really just piqued my imagination.
Yeah.
Looking at maps of the Arctic when I was a kid fascinated me. Uncharted territory. What was there? Why don't we have more on the map in those areas? Well, there's not much there, but I wondered what was there, and I wanted to go, and I wanted to see that for myself. So in college, I took some geography courses as an education major, and then my senior year, I realized you could actually major in geography. I thought geography was just memorizing state capitals or flags. Geography is a social science. It can be a physical science depending on what you're doing with it, what you're mapping, what you're studying. Geography is the study of spatial data, spatial analysis. Geography looks for patterns, and they use maps, they use data, they use statistics. Maps are just a tool. So I realized senior year I could really study this more, so I went straight into grad school in geography, master's in geography at the University of Cincinnati, my undergrad from Miami of Ohio, and did a 2-year geography master's. And you take a little bit of cartography, map making. They were in quarters at the time. They've now switched to semesters, but my first quarter I took a manual cartography class, how to make a map with the old-fashioned tools that they used.
Wow.
Black ink pens, Koh-i-Noor was the name of the company. The tools that you would use to write letters. And I don't really remember it all because it was 1 quarter. It was 10 weeks. But they wanted you to have an appreciation of that, of how it used to be done. Because a lot of the terminology in cartography goes back to having to use ink and paper.
Yeah.
So then I went on to the computer cartography stuff that we're all doing today. And I was lucky enough to get a job out of grad school working for a local company that made street maps. So I would go around the country field checking maps and then coming back home and drawing them up on the computer, maps for cities, for chambers of commerce, everywhere from Des Moines, Iowa to Sarasota, Florida to cities in Virginia and all across mostly the eastern U.S.
Travel maps, things like that. What to do locally.
It was
like that.
Very detailed street map, but it was the map that the chamber gave out for free. It was the number one requested item at the time when paper maps were still a thing. Mid-2000s come along, paper maps tank as Garmin's and GPS comes along. And then in another 5 years after that, cell phones.
You're all replaced by automated vehicles now.
We were replaced. My paper maps were replaced. The company tanked, and I was able to transition to the local energy company who have maps that they need of all their utilities.
Wow.
Gas and electric. And those are all done online. So I was able to transition to that. But I still love the paper maps. And when I got into wanting to map the paranormal, I thought about, do I do a paper map or do I make it available digitally?
Virtually,
Yep, virtually, digitally. The digital map would be great. This was still early on, 2005, 6, 7, when I was doing the first map of Ohio with my haunted spots, my cryptid sightings, my UFOs. And I really wanted a paper map once so you could just spread it out and see it. And I did want to see if there were patterns. You know, are there patterns to where the haunted spots are versus the UFO sightings versus cryptids and Bigfoot sightings and other anomalies, ancient American earthworks that Ohio has a lot of, Serpent Mound and Miamisburg Mound, which is an 80-foot tall mound. Is there a pattern? Perhaps. I could not map everything that I think I needed to on the map. I didn't put every haunted spot. I didn't put every Bigfoot sighting because the map would just be illegible.
It would be huge.
It would be huge.
We show the map from the Bigfoot Research Organization regularly on the show, and and typically in the aspect of, so you think that we've discovered all of America and that we've settled it. Well, here's a map of the United States at night. Like, here's a shot of the U.S. at night from the ISS. There's a lot of black there.
The black.
There's
so
a lot of
that.
non-light.
Yes.
And it's funny how when you overlay the BFRO map on top of that, it's almost identical where the sightings are and where there's no light.
Right.
You know,
Right.
It's pretty remarkable.
When I was doing Map in Black too, so I did the Ohio map first with the paranormal activity. People wanted other states, so I decided to map the whole country. Took 10 years of research to map this Map in Black for the whole country and parts of Canada, and exhaustive amount of time to do that. I didn't think I'd get done. I would stop and go so many times over the years, and raising kids and getting them off to college, which happened in the late 2010s, 2019, and then the pandemic hit. I was almost done with the map. My job went remote, no extra social activities because of the pandemic. I was able to concentrate and finish the Map in Black. So a lot of people are like, well, the pandemic was awful. I agree. But it got me to finish the map. So.
You know, I had quite a few projects that I X'd off my list, and it was really nice because they were things that, like this, had been haunting me for years. Where it was like, man, when I get the bandwidth and I get the time to sit down and do it, it's gonna be awesome. And I treasure that time I had because now we're all back to our busy lives.
The
madness of the world. And how have you seen the world of, aside from technology, things like that, have you seen a rebirth in paper map loving?
I have, for these maps specifically, I don't know in general if I've seen a rebirth of the love of paper maps, but when people see my maps, they're like, oh, I love maps and this is great. And I just think if you're trying to look at a phone and find out where these things are, it just doesn't display the same way.
Yeah.
So you unfold the map and you can get a idea of the surroundings and you see other places nearby. And I think that's important to have that connection.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's not so hyper-focused on that one spot.
Well, yeah. And especially whenever you're doing online research. I have recently, in the last year or so, moved to a digital tablet.
Nice.
I no longer carry a tablet with me. That is for entertainment. Everything else, work, all that, it's done on this. It is distraction-free. I don't get distracted by social media randomly. I don't like, oh, look, this thing popped up. Let me rabbit hole on it.
Exactly.
You know, so the idea of, hey, if you were trying to do some in-depth local research, trying to see even directionally where things line up. Does something follow a certain ley line across the United States? Yep. This is an easy way to be able to do it. A, distraction-free, and B, where it's compiled.
Yep.
I mean, you have everything from the U.S. Air Force bases on there.
I do.
To once again, Native American sites, Bigfoot sighting sites, everything.
Petroglyphs. I have telescopes, just because where are we putting our telescopes to look out into the universe?
Yeah, and where can you go find a publicly accessible telescope? Yeah. You know, because believe it or not, you can, hey, if you get a hold of the right people, you can rent time on a telescope and go like hang out and see stuff that's absolutely amazing. So.
I highly recommend it. Cincinnati, where I am, has one. It's one of the older ones. You'd think, why does Cincinnati have one? It's in the middle of an area with light pollution. It's still cool to see stuff.
You would be surprised what you can get. I'm a backyard astronomer and take a lot of backyard astronomy photography.
Nice.
The pictures that I have of the Orion Nebula, people are like, where did you get that? And I'm like, from my backyard in Cedar Park, Texas. They're like, isn't that light polluted? And I've got a neighbor's garage light about 15 feet away. But you'd be surprised what you can catch. You'd be surprised what you can see. And that was all from a friend of mine who saw some of my moon shots. It was like, dude, you know, you got a group of lenses and a camera. Like, if you just go and point it at Orion's belt, you'd be surprised what you get on a long exposure.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Yep.
And my mind was blown. And I was like, oh my God. Like, it's telescope time, Jack. I have been rabbit holing on that and having so much fun, and actively just recently got a fold-out map of the galaxy, like all of the constellations,
Yes, I've
things
seen
like
those,
that,
yep.
to show my son because I'm busy teaching him that, and it is such a useful tool
Yep.
for teaching kids, for carrying on that kind of stuff. He loves maps. He loves them.
Excellent.
So
Glad to hear.
It's interesting to pass that along and to see how that can be passed along. How have you used this to, I mean, obviously you have a love of the paranormal.
Sure.
Otherwise, what brought you to want to gather all of that together to begin with? Because that is, once again, a decade-long daunting task, Jeff.
I watched a movie I'm sure all of your viewers have probably heard of called The Mothman Prophecies. And I watched that in about 2004. A friend suggested we rent it on DVD. We may have even gone to Blockbuster Video to pick it up.
Right.
I don't remember, but I'd seen the movie in the video store. I saw that it starred Richard Gere, and so I was not really that interested. I had no idea it was a movie about a cryptid, a strange creature. I thought it was an interesting name, but I never really gave it a second look until my buddy said we should watch this. So kudos, Brian Davenport, if you're out there listening. He helped get me on this path. So we watched the movie. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check it out. It's also a book. It was a book first by lygne-kehl. And it talks about a strange creature that was seen in and around Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the late 60s. Obviously a long time ago, but it was a very big story at the time, and it had some big ramifications, and it just really spiked my interest. So here I am in Cincinnati, just a couple hours downriver from where this happened, down the Ohio River. I'm like, why hadn't I ever heard of this before? Well, one, I grew up in Chicago, and two, it happened 50 years ago, so that's why I hadn't heard of it. It opened my eyes. I'm like, what else am I not knowing about?
Yeah.
Why didn't I know about this? This is crazy. This strange creature was seen all over the region by hundreds and hundreds of people. Law enforcement gave alibis, sworn affidavits that they saw this creature.
Yeah.
You know, they're putting their job on the line. This isn't just some off sighting by one person. This was a pattern over a period of time. Other weird things going on, UFOs, men in black, lots of strange happenings at the time that I learned about later that really isn't covered in the movie too much. It is a little bit, but so the movie's Hollywoodized, of course, but still a good introduction for me and got me on this path where I'm like wanting to discover what else is out there and being a map guy anyways. I'm like, I got to put this on a map. I got to see if, what's going on. Is there a pattern? So that's what got me on that whole journey. Granted, it happened in West Virginia. It was right on the border of Ohio. Being in Ohio, I focused on Ohio, mapped Ohio first with a little bit of West Virginia in there. The way you do a border around Ohio, you're going to get a good portion of West Virginia in there with the Mothman sightings. So that was what started me on this whole journey. And I'm like, well, if I like this, maybe other people do too. So let me get the map looking good, and I'll put it out there. I reached out to some people. Like, hey, do you want to help sponsor this? You know, I'll give you a free little blip on the map, a little ad, so to speak. And then started trying to sell it. And then I found a local bookstore called Half Price Books, which I know you have in Texas.
Love Half Price Books.
And they got on the bandwagon about a year later, and they started selling it just in Ohio, because it was just an Ohio map at the time. And that, I mean, there's like 15 stores all across Ohio in our big cities.
Awesome.
Ohio has Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, and all those big cities have like 4 stores in each spot. So it really helped distribute the map.
That is awesome.
Then I kept looking for other places. You know, the Serpent Mound gift shop sells it, and other places. So people really helped get the word out by offering it at their store. And I love the independent bookstores. I love getting it into those places.
Yep.
When I did Map in Black in 2020, I had really gotten to know how to kind of get the maps out to places. And, of course, Half Price Books, being nationwide, was on with getting it into their stores across the country. 122 stores. Wow. I think half of them are in Texas.
Yeah, there's a good 40 in Texas.
So that's well covered. And then I just, the Mothman Museum carries it now with the national version map in black. And apparently people love paper maps because it's selling great. I've sold 50,000 maps. Wow. Mostly the Hidden Ohio because that's what's been out longest. But going on 10,000 map in black for the whole country here.
That is incredible, man.
Years. Yeah.
Congratulations. That is a huge individual accomplishment.
Well, thank you. I love that people embrace it. I'm so tickled. To this day, every individual map I mail out, if someone orders it from me, I look at their name, I look at their city. I'm like, I am so happy that this person found me, and they want the map, and I'm honored and humbled, to be honest.
That is really cool. One question I would have is updates?
I've already updated Map in Black once. It came out in 2020. I sold 5,000 copies, which was my print run. Yeah. I made a few minor tweaks because I didn't like the way a few things looked. Like my symbol for Ancient American Earthworks was a big orange circle with kind of like your ring, actually. It almost looked like the sun. To me, it made it look like the map had measles.
Okay.
So the second edition now that it's out, that says 2022 at the top, has a new logo, a new symbol for the earthworks that I think fits better. So you're always tweaking it. Sure. There was a typo or two on the first map that got through that I had fixed on the second edition. The Ohio map is in the 4th edition. Okay. I've updated that 4 times over the years in the 15 years it's been out.
And have you reached out to any researchers of note to get their feedback on it? Maybe get some additional spots, things like that.
I do reach out. Ohio has some people that are Bigfoot researchers. Don Keating was actually a guy I reached out to at the very beginning. And he was helpful way back in 2005 and 6 when I was doing the research. There's a UFO group in Ohio called the Round Town UFO Society. Okay. And we found each other in doing the research on the map. They found me, actually. I'm not really sure how, but perhaps that's a story for another time.
Resourceful people, my friend.
Yes, they knew I was doing the map somehow. And they're like, you have to have this UFO sighting. It's one of the first classic UFO encounters that they said happened in outside of Circleville, Ohio, which has the nickname of Round Town. So that's why the UFO Society is called the Round Town UFO Society. Okay. It was a classic encounter, that classic kind of UFO disc-shaped object. A farmer saw one night at 2 a.m. He didn't tell people for like 10 years because he didn't want people to think like he was crazy, which is unfortunately something I think that happens a lot.
All too frequent.
Yeah. So, but later on he shared it, and so that's how I find some of these things on the map.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Have you ever had an experience yourself, Jeff?
I have not had a real concrete experience. When I was at Moonville Tunnel, which is one of my favorite haunted spots in Ohio, I was taking some friends there actually on our way to the Mothman Festival. Okay. And we stopped at Moonville, which is this abandoned railroad tunnel, a brick tunnel, very beautiful, in the middle of what is now Zaleski State Forest in southeastern Ohio. People who don't know Ohio real well might think of it as a big urban, suburban kind of state. A good deal of the country is very rural, and southeastern Ohio is the foothills of Appalachia. Yeah. So here we are in the foothills of Appalachia, and there's this old railroad tunnel, brick tunnel. It says Moonville on it. It's such a cool name to begin with. Like, how can it not be haunted with the name Moonville? That was the name of the settlement. It's on the old USGS topo maps. They put a tunnel through the hills of the Appalachian foothills here for the railroad to take the iron and coal out of the hills, and it then became abandoned when more inexpensive resources were found elsewhere. So the tunnel remains, and ghost story goes that the Lantern Man fell off the train and was decapitated. The Lantern Man held the lantern on the train back when they needed
signaling
that.
additional cars, things like that.
Yep, exactly. So he fell off, was decapitated. So the story goes that he's still out there looking for his head, carrying his lantern. So we're there. Nothing happens that night, but my friend Janet was taking photos with a camera with film in it.
Okay.
So weeks later, she messages me and says, "Did you have a flashlight?" And I said, "No." So next time I saw her, she had the film developed, and there was a light in the background behind me, and it was getting dark. It was not dark yet, but it was getting dark, and here's this light behind me.
Interesting.
No explanation. Is it the Lantern Man? Who knows?
Could be.
You don't see a figure, you don't see a person, you don't see a lantern, but you just see this bright white light. Is it a blip in the film?
Yeah.
You know, that's what the logical mind wants to say.
Sure.
But
yeah.
it doesn't look like a blip. It looks like a light.
Wow.
So that's the closest
Remarkable.
I've been
That's
to
all right.
anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's been other weird things that have gone in my life that aren't ghost related, but just weird synchronicities that pop up. I'm sure we all have them if we look for them.
Yeah.
And there's ones there that kind of blow my mind, like the odds of certain things happening just don't seem right. And that's really what a coincidence is just the odds are not in favor of that thing. That thing should not happen.
Yeah.
Could it happen? Yes. Are the odds
good for it? No.
So low with some of the things that have gone on that make me wonder about some things out there that just aren't logical. And do I have the answers? No. Will I ever have the answers? Probably not, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the concepts we talk about regularly on the show is the idea of even you going to the spot that is your favorite haunted spot. Like, are you possibly charging that location before you get there? Are you actively putting yourself in a mindset to be more receptive to an experience?
I'd been there many times to Moonville, and I wanted to show these friends the spot on our way to the Mothman Fest, so I like that idea.
Yeah, the idea that, you know... we regularly have conversations on the way to the table in the world, and that utterly affects the way we have that conversation, you know, because, when you ask the questions, you typically hear the answer in your head, too. So, we have to be careful, preconceived notions going into places.
For sure.
And, you know, what we put out there. But you have put out some amazing work, dude. I cannot wait to see what you keep releasing.
Oh, appreciate it.
Because this is incredible. The fact that you went through the effort to compile this massive amount of data is incredible. I don't know a cryptid researcher or paranormal researcher out there that should be without this. Let everybody know where they can go to get their copy of Map in Black, where they can go to follow you, where they can go to get everything from Map in Black and Jeff Craig.
Yeah, go to mapinblack.com to order the national version, this Map in Black here. You can follow Map in Black on Instagram or Facebook. And if you are in Ohio and just want the Ohio map, I do have a different website for that, and that's celticmaps.com.
Awesome.
And, of course, if it's at a store, I'd love that you would support the store and just get it there, whether it's Half Price Books, or if you don't have it at your favorite bookseller or gift shop, you can certainly ask them to carry it, and I would love to have them have it there. It helps them, it helps me, and it helps you.
Absolutely.
And I love the small independent businesses especially, so find your local little family-owned bookstore and see if they want to carry it.
And this is a great way, folks. Like, if your kids are into cryptid stuff like that, but do not groove on geography, this right here, dude, this could not be a better teaching tool for kids that, like, geography just ain't their jam.
Learn your states.
You can teach them right here.
Very detailed base map.
It's
every
awesome.
national park, every state, every national forest. The Ohio map has very detailed base maps, more detailed than the Ohio road map, the highway map you get for free there at the rest stops and stuff. Yeah.
Well,
so
Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time, coming on.
You're
I
welcome.
greatly appreciate it. While you are online checking out all of the amazing work from Jeff Craig and mapinblack.com, make sure to stop on by curiousrealm.com. That's where you can find all of our coverage from live events such as MUFON Symposium, other events like Texas UFO Con, International Remote Viewing Association, etc. That is also where you can follow, like, subscribe to the show, and where you can find our curiousrealm.com/story page, where you can share your experience of the paranormal or extraterrestrial, and we will share your story and evidence with our researchers to try to get you some answers. That ends our coverage for day 2 of MUFON Symposium 2023 here in Covington, Kentucky. Stay tuned, everybody. After this commercial break, we'll be upcoming with our day 3 coverage and our final coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023 right after this.